Hi guys, tonight we drop gently into a place where daylight thins faster than you expect, where the mountains swallow the sun early and the cold arrives before you are emotionally prepared for it. You are standing there at dusk boots, planted in crunchy snow breath, already sounding louder than your thoughts. Somewhere behind you, the last colour drains from the sky. Ahead of you, the wilderness is settling in for the night. This is not a dramatic movie moment. This is the quiet beginning of a long education. You probably will not survive this night if you treat it like a camping trip. That is not meant to scare you. It is meant to focus you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are here, drop a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is there right now. Now dim the lights and let the story carry you forward. You are a mountain man now, at least in aspiration. Not the romantic painting version, with perfect buckskins and heroic posture, but the real kind. The kind who understands very quickly that sleep is not rest out here. Sleep is survival. The first lesson arrives before you ever lie down. Cold announces itself early, well before night has fully taken hold. It creeps in from the ground upward, seeping through leather soles, climbing the legs, settling into the hips. You learn that waiting too long to prepare is not brave, it is careless. A widely accepted historical reality is that most mountain men did not die in dramatic fights or sudden blizzards. Many succumbed quietly to exposure, illness, or exhaustion that built night after night. The danger did not always roar. Often it whispered while you were trying to sleep. You start to understand that the evening hours are not downtime, they are decision time. You pause listening. The wilderness sounds different at dusk. There is a brief, uneasy stillness before the night creatures fully take over. Snow muffles everything. Even your movements feel intrusive, like you are disturbing something already settled. The smell of pine sharpens as temperatures drop. Smoke from a small fire would hang low, now visible, against the darkening trees. You make a mental note of that. Fire has a price. There is a strange tidbit recorded in some trapper journals that new arrivals often tried to recreate bedtime routines from home. Nightcaps, loosened clothing, even undressing fully to sleep. A few nights cured them of that habit. Clothing here is not about comfort, it is about readiness. You do not undress for bed in the mountains. You rearrange yourself. Historians still argue whether early mountain men consciously understood the physics of heat loss, or whether they simply learned through repetition and consequence. Either way, the knowledge settled into muscle memory. You feel it now, as you move with intentions slower than you would like, conserving energy. Even your breathing changes. Deep, controlled, careful not to fog your thoughts, along with the air. You choose where to stop not by how tired you feel, but by how the land behaves. Cold pools in low places. Valleys that look inviting in daylight become traps at night. You notice frost, thicker in certain dips. The way air seems heavier there. You have heard the stories. Men who bedded down in beautiful hollows and never woke up. The ground itself matters more than the sky above you. As you begin preparing for night, you feel a subtle shift inside yourself. Modern instincts tell you that sleep comes after everything is done. Out here, sleep is part of the work. You are already tired, but you resist the urge to rush. Rushing leads to sweat. Sweat leads to dampness. Dampness leads to cold that no blanket can fix. You slow down on purpose. There is a mainstream historical observation that many mountain men slept in short bursts rather than long stretches. You are not thinking about that yet, but your body is already adjusting. Awareness does not switch off easily in this environment. It hums quietly even as fatigue pulls at you. You handle your gear by feel fingers already stiffening. Canvas is rough. Fur smells faintly of animal and smoke. These are not unpleasant scents. They are reassuring. They mean insulation. They mean someone before you figured this out. You remember hearing that some trappers believed certain furs slept warmer if they still carried a bit of the animal's natural oil. It sounds superstitious, but experience often blurs the line between belief and function. The light fades completely now. Stars appear sharp and close, almost intrusive. There is no soft transition. Night arrives like a door closing. You become acutely aware of your own smallness. The mountains do not care if you sleep well. They do not care if you sleep at all. You take one last look around, memorizing shapes and distances. If you need to move suddenly in the dark, this memory may matter. This habit shows up again and again in personal accounts. Men described knowing their campsites by touch and instinct more than sight. They learn to navigate their immediate world without standing up fully. A gentle wind slides through the trees, not strong but deliberate. It brushes your face, testing. You turn slightly, letting it pass over your shoulder instead of into your chest. Small adjustments like this begin now. They will continue all night. As you settle in, you realize something important. The fear you expected has not arrived. What you feel instead is focus, a narrowing of concerns. Sleep will come later in pieces. For now, you are learning how night works here, how cold announces itself, how the land chooses who pays attention and who does not. You lower yourself carefully, keeping movement smooth, economical. Nothing snaps, nothing rushes. The ground presses back firm and unforgiving. You accept that. Comfort is not the goal. Waking up is. Your eyes close briefly, then open again. Not yet, not quite. There is more to learn before real sleep begins. You do not choose sleep by closing your eyes. You choose it by choosing the ground. This lesson arrives quietly, almost politely, as you shift your weight and feel how the earth answers back. Not all snow feels the same. Not all frozen ground behaves honestly. Some places lie to you until it is too late. You start to notice how the land breathes cold. It slides downhill like water, invisible but deliberate. The lowest spots gather it first. What looked like a sheltered dip in daylight now feels heavy, stale, as if the air itself has stopped moving. You step into one of these hollows and immediately feel it. The temperature drops a notch, maybe two. Your breath thickens. This is where cold settles in and refuses to leave. You step back out without debate. A commonly accepted historical observation is that experienced mountain men preferred sleeping slightly uphill, even if it meant more wind. Wind could be managed. Cold pooling could not. This choice saved lives in ways that never made it into dramatic stories. It was not heroic, it was practical. You scan the slope again, letting your eyes soften rather than sharpen. Sharp focus misses patterns. Soft focus reveals them. Frost feathers thicker along the bottom edges. Snow there looks denser, almost damp. Up the incline, it sparkles lighter, looser. That difference matters. Dampness steals heat faster than air ever could. There is a strange little detail mentioned in one lesser-known diary where a trapper described tossing a scrap of fur ahead of him and watching where it slid or stuck. It sounds almost childish, but it worked. Where the fur stayed put the ground was firm and cold drained away. Where it slid and settled, air pooled. You do not have fur to throw right now, but the idea stays with you. Read the land before you trust it with your body. Historians still argue whether these skills were taught explicitly or absorbed through quiet observation. No manuals survive that explain it cleanly. What remains are fragments, habits passed sideways through example rather than instruction. You feel that process happening now. No one is telling you what to do. The ground is. You move again, slow and deliberate. Each step is placed, not wasted. You test the snow with your boot, pressing down to feel what lies beneath. A hollow sound means danger. Air pockets collapse under weight and pull cold upward. A solid crunch is what you want. Firm earth beneath thin snow. Predictable, honest. You pause near a cluster of trees. Their trunks break the wind slightly, not enough to create turbulence, but enough to soften it. The snow around their bases is uneven, shaped by drifting rather than pooling. That is a good sign. You crouch briefly, feeling the air near the ground. It is colder there, yes, but not dead, not stagnant. One mainstream historical fact that shows up repeatedly is that many mountain men avoided sleeping directly against large rocks, despite their sheltering appearance. Rocks radiate cold long after sunset. They store it the way they store heat. Leaning against one feels fine at first. Hours later, it can drain warmth relentlessly. You keep a respectful distance. As you settle on a spot that feels right enough, you mark it mentally. Not with flags or gear, but with memory, the angle of the trees, the shape of the shadow, the way the stars line up overhead. If you wake disoriented, these cues will anchor you. This habit appears again and again in accounts, though rarely explained. Men woke often at night. Knowing where you were without sitting up mattered. You lower yourself, carefully testing the ground with one knee before committing your full weight. The cold presses back immediately, assertive but not hostile. You accept that. Resistance wastes energy. You adjust, shifting slightly until pressure distributes evenly. Small movements now prevent big corrections later. There is an odd fringe belief recorded among some trappers that sleeping with your head slightly higher than your feet reduced the feeling of cold creeping upward. Whether this was physiological or psychological remains unclear. You find yourself doing it anyway, propping subtly with folded gear. It feels right. Sometimes that is enough. The smell here is faint but present. Resin, snow, a hint of old smoke from somewhere far away. These smells matter more than you expect. They tell you the air is moving slowly, gently. Stagnant air smells flat. This does not. You breathe easier. Wind brushes your cheek again, light and curious. You turn your face away, angling your body so it flows over your back instead of into your chest. This adjustment becomes instinctive, faster than you would like to admit. Already your body is learning faster than your thoughts. You think briefly of modern camping advice of flat pads and designated sites. None of that applies cleanly here. Flat is not always safe. Sheltered is not always warm. You smile faintly at the idea. The mountains rewrite rules without asking permission. As you prepare to fully commit to this place, you do one last check. You listen. Not for animals not yet, but for the absence of sound. A dead quiet can mean trapped air, snow smothering movement. This place still whispers. Wind threads through branches. Snow settles softly. The land is awake, not sealed shut. A quirky detail mentioned in a few letters home describes men sleeping with one boot unlaced and the other fully tied just to feel which foot cooled faster. It sounds ridiculous, but it trained awareness. You do not do this, but you flex your toes slightly, checking sensation. Everything responds. Good. You lie back slowly, keeping your spine aligned. Sudden movements spike breath, and breath carries heat away. You exhale deliberately, long and steady. The stars above feel closer now, as if leaning in. You do not look at them for long. Staring up invites the cold into your chest. As your weight settles fully, the ground claims you. This is not comfort. This is agreement. You have chosen each other for the night. The land will not coddle you. You will not fight it. Between those two understandings, sleep will eventually find its way. Your eyes close, then open again briefly. A small adjustment, a shift of shoulder. You are not ready yet, but you are close. The ground beneath you feels honest. That is enough to move forward. You think cold is the enemy. Everyone does at first. Cold feels obvious, blunt, easy to blame. But as you lie there and feel the night begin its slow work, another presence makes itself known. It is quieter, more deliberate. Wind. It arrives without drama, sliding across your layers, slipping into seams, testing every careless gap you left behind. Cold can sit still. Wind never does. It moves like a thinking thing, searching, probing, patient. You feel it along your neck first, then along your ribs, then teasing at the edges of your sleeves. This is when you understand why old hands talked about wind the way sailors talk about reefs. A well-established historical fact is that many mountain men measured camps not by temperature, but by exposure. A slightly colder spot with blocked air could feel safer than a milder one with constant draft. This knowledge did not come from theory. It came from nights like this when the wind refused to let you forget it existed. You shift your body just enough to present a smaller profile, not dramatic, just a few degrees of turn. Wind punishes broad surfaces. You make yourself narrow. Immediately, the pressure eases. The cold does not vanish, but it becomes manageable. This small victory matters more than you would expect. Out here, marginal gains keep you alive. There is a curious detail buried in a frontier letter where a trapper compared wind to a tax collector. Cold was a known expense. Wind was the fee you forgot to budget for. It sounds like humour, but it carries truth. Wind steals warmth faster than the body can replace it. Even thick insulation fails if air keeps moving through it. Historians still debate whether mountain men intentionally built windbreaks with aerodynamic understanding, or whether repeated failure simply refined their instincts. Either way, they learned quickly that complete shelter was less important than correct orientation. You do not need a wall, you need a deflection. You scan the dark again, using memory more than sight. Trees are positioned unevenly. One cluster, upwind another, to your side. You picture how air moves around them. Wind compresses on the windward side, then spills and tumbles down the other. You adjust again, tucking yourself into the quiet pocket just beyond the worst of it. The difference is immediate and profound. Your breathing slows, not because you're relaxed, but because the fight has eased. Wind forces the body to work harder just to maintain temperature. Without it, the effort drops. Your muscles soften slightly. You let them. Tension generates sweat, and sweat is a future problem you do not want to create. A mainstream observation in mountain survival accounts is that many men slept with faces partially covered, not for warmth alone, but to control airflow. Exposed skin becomes a sail. You pull fabric higher, leaving just enough space to breathe comfortably. The air you inhale is colder now, but calmer. That matters more. You notice sound changes too. Wind has a voice and it shifts when blocked. A sharp hiss becomes a low murmur. This tells you the barrier is working. You listen the way others once did, not with anxiety but with assessment. Night listening is a skill. You are practicing it now. There is a strange fringe belief mentioned in a handful of journals that certain directions carried worse wind spirits than others. North-facing camps were avoided not just for cold, but for something harder to explain. While the superstition is easy to dismiss, the pattern remains. North winds in these regions were often drier and more cutting. Belief followed experience, not the other way around. You adjust your layers again, not adding or removing, but sealing. A cuff smoothed, a collar tucked, a fold flattened. Wind loves chaos. Smooth surfaces give it less to grab. This is not about comfort. It is about control. As minutes stretch, you realize something subtle. Without wind, the cold feels almost honest, predictable. It presses, but it does not surprise. With wind, every gap becomes a threat. You begin to respect the stillness, more than warmth itself. You remember hearing that some mountain men would spend more time setting their wind position than their fire. Fire could be fed or abandoned. Wind stayed all night. You understand that now. Fire is temporary. Wind is persistent. Your ears catch a shift. A branch creaks differently. Snow whispers instead of rattles. The air has changed direction slightly. You respond without thinking, rolling just enough to keep your back to it. This responsiveness comes faster than expected. Already your body is learning the language. A soft calm settles in, not sleep yet, but readiness. You are no longer reacting late. You are anticipating. This is the turning point, the moment when night stops being something that happens to you and becomes something you move through. Wind still moves around you, but it no longer dominates. It has been redirected, negotiated with. You lie there, enclosed by darkness, held in place by deliberate choices made minutes ago. This is how mountain men learned, not by conquering nature, but by arranging themselves correctly within it. Your eyes close again. This time they stay closed longer, not because danger has passed, but because it has been accounted for. The wind sighs past, disappointed. You breathe steadily, conserving warmth, letting the night carry you forward. You do not learn everything from the land itself. Some knowledge arrives quietly from people who are already here, long before you imagine this life. You may not even realize at first that you're learning. It feels more like noticing, watching, absorbing patterns that do not announce themselves as lessons. The first thing you notice is how differently indigenous sleepers treat night. There is no frantic rush to conquer it, no attempt to dominate the dark. Night is treated as a condition, not an obstacle. You remember seeing how camps were arranged lower, tighter, more deliberate. Bodies placed where warmth could be shared without confusion. Gear positioned for touch rather than sight. These observations settle in your mind now, as you lie still and let memory do its quiet work. Historical records from early traders and explorers frequently remark that native winter camps appeared almost understated. Outsiders often mistook this simplicity for lack of preparation. In reality, it reflected generations of refinement. Nothing unnecessary, nothing wasted. Every element served more than one purpose, especially when it came to sleep. You recall how sleeping positions differed. Not stretched flat, not sprawled. Bodies curled, angled, compact. Heat conserved rather than generated. This posture shows up again and again in early sketches and descriptions, often without explanation. It was not taught with words, it was learned through cold. There is an intriguing aside found in one missionary account where the author admits surprise at how quietly entire families slept together through severe winters. He expected restlessness, noise, discomfort. Instead, he observed long stretches of stillness, broken only by subtle adjustments. He did not fully understand what he was seeing. You begin to. Researchers continue to discuss whether mountain men consciously adopted indigenous sleep techniques, or whether necessity simply pushed everyone toward the same solutions. The truth likely sits somewhere in between. Observation blends with desperation. When something works, you repeat it regardless of its origin. You think about insulation differently now, not as layers piled endlessly, but as systems that trap stillness. Indigenous bedding often relied on fewer layers than European setups, but those layers were arranged with precision. Furs faced inward, smooth sides out, air trapped intentionally. You adjust your own coverings with that in mind, smoothing surfaces, minimizing loose folds. Your breathing slows again as you make these changes. Calm follows efficiency. There is no hurry. You remember how some native groups slept with faces partially exposed, even in extreme cold, trusting breath control, and positioning rather than total coverage. It seemed risky at the time. Now it feels disciplined. One lesser-known detail mentioned in fur trade correspondence describes how some mountain men adopted the practice of warming bedding before lying down, not with fire, but with body heat from movement earlier in the evening. Bedding was laid out while tasks were still underway, absorbing residual warmth rather than starting cold. You realize you did something similar without planning to. Experience nudges behavior gently. The way night sounds differ here too. Indigenous camps often positioned sleepers where natural sound carried predictably. Water nearby. Wind filtered through specific trees. Silence was avoided. Total quiet meant danger. You notice that now, appreciating the soft background noise that tells you the world is still functioning. Academic discussions still circle around how much early European trappers misunderstood what they were seeing. Many wrote dismissively at first, only to quietly adopt the same habits later. Pride eroded quickly under sustained cold. Survival has a way of humbling theory. You feel a sense of gratitude you did not expect. Not sentimental, just practical. Someone figured this out long ago. You are benefiting from knowledge that survived because it worked. There is comfort in that continuity. You shift slightly, tucking an edge tighter, copying a movement you once saw done casually, almost unconsciously. It fits. The wind tests again and fails to find purchase. That success feels shared, not individual. Your thoughts drift briefly to how stories flatten these exchanges. History books often frame learning as dramatic encounters. In reality, it happened through nights like this: quiet observation, borrowed habits, small changes that added up to survival. Sleep presses closer now, heavier than before. Not overwhelming but persuasive. Your body feels arranged rather than exhausted. That difference matters. You are not collapsing into rest, you are settling into it. Somewhere far off, a sound carries through the trees. Not alarming, just present. You listen the way you have learnt without panic. Indigenous sleepers often trusted communal awareness rather than individual vigilance. You are alone, but the principle still applies. You listen without rising. The night deepens. Cold holds steady. Wind behaves. Your breathing remains even. You realize that learning did not end when you lay down. It continues now quietly, as your body absorbs patterns that words cannot fully capture. Your eyes close fully this time, not in surrender but in agreement. The night is not conquered, it is accommodated. And in that accommodation, sleep finally begins to take shape. Sleep does not mean darkness alone, it means light management. You learn this faster than you expect because fire is both friend and liability. As you settle deeper into the night, the idea of a bright, cheerful flame feels almost childish. Fire out here is not about comfort. It is about timing, restraint, and discretion. You remember how earlier you considered building the fire bigger. It would have been easy. There was fuel nearby, dry enough, tempting. But larger fires eat oxygen, draw attention, and create sharp contrasts. When they die down, the cold feels worse by comparison. This is something experienced mountain men learned early, often the hard way. A fire that burns too hot becomes a problem before it becomes a memory. Accounts from the early 19th century regularly mention what was called banking the fire, not extinguishing it, not feeding it, but persuading it to last. Embers covered carefully, just enough airflow to keep heat alive without flame. This technique appears across regions and decades, suggesting it spread quickly among those who survived long enough to teach it. You think about how light behaves in snow. It reflects, amplifies, betrays. A visible flame can be seen far beyond its warmth. Hunters, rival, trappers, animals all notice it. Even the mountains seem to notice. You prefer the quiet confidence of heat without glow. There is an unusual anecdote recorded by a trader who described learning to read embers the way others read clocks. The colour, the sound, the smell told him how long warmth would last. It sounds poetic, but it was practical. You find yourself listening now, even without a fire, attuned to subtle cues. Heat speaks softly when you let it. Scholars continue to discuss whether mountain men deliberately minimized firelight to avoid conflict, or whether fuel scarcity drove the habit. Likely, both played a role. Either way, the outcome was the same. Fire became a tool used sparingly, never indulgently. As the night deepens, you imagine how earlier trappers positioned their sleeping places just outside the reach of warmth rather than within it. This seems counterintuitive until you understand evaporation. Sweat forms quickly near heat. Sweat becomes ice farther away. You choose the middle ground, warm enough to avoid shivering, cool enough to stay dry. You shift slightly, testing. No dampness. Good. You remember reading that some men deliberately let themselves feel slightly cool before sleep, trusting insulation rather than heat. It reduced night sweats and made waking easier. You feel that logic now settled into your bones. Sound matters here too. Fire crackles, embers whisper, silence follows. Each phase carries information. Too much crackle means too much flame. Too much silence means heat is fading. Even without tending a fire tonight, your awareness tunes itself to that rhythm. This is how habits form. A lesser-known detail from a winter camp journal mentions men waking briefly just to adjust embers, not fully rising, not speaking. These moments were so routine they barely registered as waking. You understand now why uninterrupted sleep was never the expectation. Maintenance was part of rest. Your breath creates small clouds that drift and vanish. You watch them with half-closed eyes. They are faint now, less frantic than earlier. This tells you your heat balance is working. You smile slightly, not from joy, but from relief. The idea of fire as a comfort object feels distant now. Fire is infrastructure. It supports the night, but it does not dominate it. You respect it the way you respect a sharp tool. Useful, dangerous, never casual. Historians still debate whether indigenous fire practices influenced mountain men more than European ones. Evidence suggests a blending. European hearth traditions emphasize steady heat. Indigenous practices emphasize minimal presence. The frontier rewarded the latter. You remember seeing how some native camps placed fires slightly off-center, not as gathering points, but as background elements. Heat radiated gently, never overwhelming. You mirror that philosophy now, even without flame, by arranging your body where residual warmth lingers without demand. As sleep edges closer, your mind drifts briefly to modern nights, bright screens, overheated rooms, continuous light. You almost laugh at the contrast. Out here, darkness is not the enemy. It is a signal that systems are working. Your muscles loosen incrementally, not all at once. A shoulder relaxes, then a calf, then your jaw. Each release is deliberate. You do not abandon awareness, you simply soften it. Somewhere in the distance something moves. You do not react immediately. Fire would not help here. Light would not help. Listening does. The sound passes. Whatever it was, it is not concerned with you. You realize that managing fire has taught you something larger. Control does not mean intensity. It means consistency. Small maintained efforts outperform dramatic ones. This lesson applies far beyond heat. Your breathing synchronizes with the quiet around you. The night feels balanced. No sudden drops, no sharp edges. Fire, whether present or not, has been accounted for in your planning. Sleep arrives not as collapse, but as continuation. You do not fall into it. You slide gently, carefully, just warm enough, just dark enough. The night holds steady. Snow stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a tool. This shift does not happen all at once. It arrives quietly, usually, after a few miserable nights, when you realize something unexpected. The cold feels sharper when the snow is gone. When the wind has nothing to lean against, it cuts deeper. Snow, when it stays put, softens everything. You notice it first in sound. Falling snow hushes the world. The wind loses its edge, its anger dulled by white layers, piling gently against trees, rocks, and your shelter. The air itself seems thicker, more patient. You inhale and feel less bite. This is not imagination. Snow traps air. Air that does not move holds warmth better than empty space. Many winter journals describe trappers waking after a heavy snowfall, feeling warmer rather than colder. This confused early readers who associated snow with danger. In practice, accumulated snow acted like insulation, sealing cracks, filling gaps, and slowing heat loss. This observation shows up so often that it cannot be dismissed as coincidence. You adjust your thinking accordingly. Instead of brushing snow away aggressively, you leave certain areas untouched. A low drift builds along the windward side of your position. You let it. It becomes a barrier. Not a wall, but a cushion. There is a curious note in a Rocky Mountain trapping account where a man described sleeping better after deliberately pulling snow against his bedding. At first glance, it sounds reckless, but the snow stayed dry, loose, and still. It blocked wind without soaking through. The key was restraint. Packed snow conducts cold, loose snow insulates. You remember this distinction and apply it carefully. Scholars still discuss how widespread this knowledge was, and whether it spread through shared experience or independent discovery. The physics were not written down, but the results were felt. When something keeps you alive, it travels fast. You shift slightly as snow settles nearby. It does not alarm you, it reassures you. The soft thump of flakes landing is a lullaby of sorts. It tells you the world is sealing itself for the night. The exposed edges are closing. Your breath sounds quieter now. Snow absorbs noise the way it absorbs light. This matters more than you expect. Silence can be dangerous, but muffled sound, gentle and consistent, creates a sense of enclosure. You are not alone in an empty space. You are inside something. There is an odd fringe practice mentioned by a few trappers who intentionally waited for snowfall before bedding down on particularly windy nights. They understood that snow would do the work they could not. Modern readers sometimes scoff at this, but those men slept warmer than expected. Patience paid off. You feel temperature stabilize, not warm but steady. This is what matters most. Fluctuations exhaust the body. Stability conserves energy. You stop chasing warmth and start protecting balance. You remember earlier fears about being buried. That fear fades as you observe the snow's behavior. It accumulates slowly, predictably. You can feel its weight change. It is not sneaking up on you. Catastrophe requires speed. This is calm. Historical discussions often point out that avalanche danger was less of a concern for sleepers than hypothermia, especially in forested areas. Open slopes carry different risks, but here among trees, snow behaves politely. You chose this place for a reason. Your fingers twitch slightly, testing sensation. Still responsive, still dry. Good. You resist the urge to move more. Movement creates gaps. Gaps invite wind. Stillness lets snow finish its work. There is a faint smell now, almost sweet. Fresh snow carries its own scent, clean and sharp. It mixes with pine and cold earth. You breathe it in slowly. Your chest feels less tight. Researchers continue to debate how much mountain men relied on snow shelters versus open bedding. The truth is varied. What mattered was understanding snow, not fearing it. Tonight, you're not building a structure. You are letting the environment assist you. You adjust one last edge-tucking fabric, where snow has already formed a partial seal. The effect is immediate. The draft disappears. In its place is a quiet, insulated pocket of air that belongs to you. Your thoughts slow further. Snow changes time perception. Sound dampens. Visual cues vanish. The night becomes deeper, softer. This is when sleep usually arrives, not with force, but with permission. You allow it. Your body sinks into the rhythm of breath and stillness. Snow continues to fall indifferent and helpful. You're not fighting the night anymore. You are working with it. As consciousness drifts, one idea remains clear. Snow is not the enemy. Movement is. Exposure is. Snow, when understood, is shelter delivered gently from the sky. Your breathing evens out. The world outside fades behind a white curtain. Inside, that quiet sleep takes hold steady and unhurried. You never fully undress. That idea disappears early, usually, after the first time you wake shivering with numb fingers, and the sinking realization that pulling clothes back on costs more heat than keeping them on ever did. Out here, sleep clothing is not about comfort or tradition. It is about readiness. You arrange layers the way others might arrange tools. You feel each piece differently now. Wool presses with a dry insistence, faintly scratchy but dependable. It does not cling. It does not collapse when damp. It holds air even when compressed under your weight. Cotton, you already know, would betray you quietly. It drinks moisture and gives nothing back. Many early trappers learned this lesson only once. Personal accounts from the fur trade era often note that men slept dressed almost exactly as they travelled, with only minor adjustments. Coats loosened but not removed. Belts shifted. Boots sometimes stayed on, sometimes came off depending on conditions. The goal was never luxury. It was speed. If you had to move suddenly, you would not want to negotiate frozen laces with clumsy fingers. You test your own setup now. Sleeves pulled down, fully overlapping gloves or mitts just enough to seal the wrists. Collar turned inward, so no bare skin greets the air. You tuck fabric rather than layer endlessly. Bulk creates gaps. Gaps invite wind. There is a small but telling detail mentioned in a mountain journal, where a man described sleeping with one sleeve partially rolled and the other fully extended, simply to notice temperature differences through the night. It sounds obsessive until you understand the logic. Awareness prevents disaster. You do not copy the habit, but you remain alert to sensation, noting how heat distributes across your body. Scholars continue to examine whether this constant partial alertness affected long-term sleep quality among mountain men. Some argue it led to chronic exhaustion. Others suggest the body adapted trading deep, uninterrupted sleep for survival-ready rest. You feel that trade-off happening now. You are not sinking into oblivion. You are floating just above it. Your legs shift slightly, knees drawing closer together. This posture feels instinctive now. Reducing surface area conserves heat. You do not stretch out unless conditions allow it. Tonight, compact is better. Efficient. Boots remain nearby. You decided earlier not to wear them to bed, but they are positioned within reach, toes angled towards you. If you wake needing them, you will not search. This habit shows up repeatedly in first-hand descriptions. Darkness punishes fumbling. There is an unusual observation in one trader's letter, where he described sleeping with socks turned inside-out seams, outward to reduce pressure points and improve circulation. It sounds trivial, but small discomforts wake you repeatedly. You check your own feet. No pinching, no folds, good. You notice how your body heat builds slowly inside the layers. Not quickly, not dramatically. It is a gradual negotiation. Each exhale warms the pocket around your face. Each still moment allows insulation to do its work. You resist the urge to adjust constantly. Motion resets the process. The cold still exists. It presses from below, from the air, from the night itself. But it no longer intrudes sharply. It is filtered, managed. This is the difference proper clothing makes. Not warmth, but control. Historical discussions often highlight that mountain men prioritized repair over replacement. Clothing was mended obsessively, not for appearance but for function. A small tear could become a wind tunnel by morning. You run your fingers along seams, checking by feel. Everything holds. There is a fringe belief recorded among some trappers that sleeping with a hat pulled low over the eyes helped preserve warmth by calming the mind as much as the body. Whether psychological or physical, it worked for them. You pull your own head covering lower, shading your eyes from starlight. The effect is immediate. Darkness deepens, thoughts slow. You breathe steadily, counting nothing, measuring nothing. Just breathing. The layers rise and fall with you. They feel less like clothing now, and more like an extension of your skin. Your awareness drifts briefly, then returns. This light sleep would have frustrated you at home. Here it reassures you. You wake easily. You would notice changes. That matters more than dreaming. There is a quiet satisfaction in knowing you could stand up and move within seconds if needed. That readiness eases anxiety. Anxiety creates tension. Tension creates sweat. You see the chain clearly now. Proper clothing breaks it. You remember how earlier settlers sometimes brought heavy nightshirts and bedding from Europe, only to abandon them after one winter. Too bulky, too slow. Adaptation required letting go of familiar ideas about bedtime. The wind tests again, but your layers hold. The snow seals? Your body heat stays where it belongs. You make one final micro-adjustment, smoothing a fold, then stillness returns. Sleep deepens slightly this time. Not total, but enough. You feel the edges of thoughts soften. Sensations blur, warmth stabilizes. You do not dream yet. Dreams come later when the body feels safe enough to wander. For now, rest is functional, deliberate, effective. You remain dressed, you remain prepared, you remain alive, and in the quiet success of that arrangement, sleep finally settles in, more fully carrying you gently forward into the night. The bedroll is no longer just something you carry. It becomes a quiet promise you make to yourself each night. If everything else fails, if the wind shifts, or the fire fades, or your body simply runs out of energy, this roll of fur canvas and habit is what stands between you and the cold ground's patience. You feel its weight even before you touch it. Not heavy in the modern sense, but dense with purpose. Every layer inside it has been chosen for a reason. Fur turned inward to trap warmth. canvas outward to block moisture and wind. Nothing decorative, nothing extra. This was never meant to look good. It was meant to work while you slept. Accounts from the height of the Rocky Mountain fur trade consistently mention bedrolls as the most prized personal possession after weapons. Men would abandon traps trade goods, even horses, before leaving a good bedroll behind. That fact alone tells you everything you need to know about its importance. You ease yourself into it carefully, not diving in, not crushing the loft. Insulation works because of air held still. You respect that now. You slide rather than drop, letting the layers settle naturally around you. Immediately, the ground's bite dulls. Not gone, but blunted. Enough. There is a curious mention in one lesser-read trapping memoir, where a man described knowing his bedroll better than his own hands. He could tell if something was wrong by feel alone. A missing fold, a damp patch, a change in smell. You start to understand that intimacy now. As you adjust your fingers, read the layers instinctively. Some historians continue to question how standardized bedroll construction actually was. Popular images suggest uniform kits, but evidence points to endless variation. What mattered was not design, but understanding. Men modified endlessly, cutting away what failed, reinforcing what held. Your own setup reflects that philosophy. No two nights are identical. You pull the top edge up and over, sealing it near your shoulders, but not trapping your breath. Condensation is the enemy here. Moisture builds silently, then freezes. You leave a narrow vent angled so warm air escapes without inviting wind inside. This detail appears often in personal letters, mentioned casually, as if obvious. It is only obvious after you learn it once. Your legs draw in slightly, feet pressing together. The bedroll holds them as a single unit, warmer that way. You feel heat pooling slowly, not rushing. That is the sign you want. Rushing warmth means sweat. Sweat means trouble later. There is an odd fringe practice mentioned by a few mountain men who slept with small personal items tucked into the bedroll, not for warmth, but for reassurance. A pipe, a charm, a piece of home. Whether psychological comfort translated into physical rest is still debated by modern scholars, but the habit was real. You smile faintly, understanding the impulse without needing to copy it. The smell inside the bedroll is familiar now. Fur, smoke, a hint of animal oil. These scents are not unpleasant. They signal dryness. They tell you the roll has not been compromised. Wet fur smells wrong. Sharp. Sour. This smells steady. You shift once, carefully redistributing weight, so no single point compresses too much insulation. Pressure kills loft. Loft kills cold. This chain has become second nature faster than you expected. You do not analyze it. You simply act. Wind brushes the outer canvas, but it slides off. The roll deflects it the way water deflects around stone. You feel the difference immediately. Inside, the air remains still. That stillness feels like safety. There is a widely acknowledged observation in frontier survival writing that men often slept better outdoors in a good bedroll than indoors without one. Cabins leaked air, floors wicked heat. A proper roll created a personal environment that could outperform walls. You understand that now. As the night presses in and fails to penetrate, your breathing deepens slightly, not dramatic, just enough. Each exhale warms the pocket near your face. You resist the urge to pull the roll higher. Oversealing leads to dampness. Balance again. Everything is balance. Researchers still discuss whether bedroll sleeping altered posture and long-term joint health. Some argue it strengthened bodies. Others suggest it created chronic stiffness. The men themselves rarely commented. Survival overshadowed comfort. You stretch your toes once, then settle. You notice how the bedroll shapes your awareness. Sounds from outside feel farther away, filtered. Not gone, just softened. This allows you to relax without disconnecting completely. You would wake if something changed. That knowledge eases you. A small detail from a Hudson Bay Company record mentions men repairing bedrolls before anything else when supplies ran low. Even boots came second. Cold feet hurt. Cold sleep kills. Priorities sharpen in winter. You smooth the edge one last time, sealing a small gap near your hip. Immediately, warmth evens out. Your body recognizes the improvement. Muscles loosen incrementally. Thoughts drift, not wandering yet, but loosening their grip. The bedroll cradles you without softness. Supportive, honest. You are not sinking into it. You are being held in place. The snow continues its quiet work outside. Wind behaves. Fire is no longer needed. Your systems are aligned. Ground choice, wind management, clothing, snow, bedroll. Each layer of decision stacks neatly. Sleep approaches in waves now. Light, then slightly deeper, then light again. You do not resist this pattern. Historical accounts suggest this segmented rest was normal, even expected. The body wakes, checks, settles again. You float with it. Your last clear thought before drifting is simple and grounding. If you wake cold, you will know why. If you wake warm, you did something right. Either way, you will wake. That certainty is enough. The bedroll does its quiet work. The night holds steady, and sleep, patient and earned, settles around you like another layer pulled gently into place. You do not sleep unarmed, but it is not about expecting a fight. It is about reach. In the dark, distance becomes danger. Anything you might need must live where your hands can find it without thought. This rule applies as much to tools as it does to weapons, and you learn quickly that the distinction matters less at night. Your knife rests where your fingers naturally fall when your arm relaxes, not clenched, not gripped, simply there. Familiar weight, familiar shape. You are not rehearsing violence, you are rehearsing response. If something goes wrong, hesitation costs heat breath time. None of those are plentiful. Period journals frequently mention men sleeping with tools arranged in precise order, even after days of exhaustion. A rifle leaned just so, a powder horn placed consistently, a hatchet positioned handle first. This consistency mattered more than proximity alone. In darkness, muscle memory replaces sight. You practice that now, touching each item, once confirming placement, then leaving it alone. There is a lesser-known anecdote from a winter expedition where a man described waking suddenly convinced something was wrong, only to realize his knife was not where it should be. Nothing else had changed. That alone jolted him fully awake. He spent the rest of the night alert and cold. The lesson stuck. Order is reassurance. Researchers continue to explore whether this constant readiness increased anxiety or reduced it. Evidence suggests the latter. When tools were accessible, men slept more easily. Preparedness calmed the mind. You feel that effect now. Knowing where things are allows your thoughts to loosen their grip. Your hands are stiff but capable. You flex them once slowly, then tuck them back into warmth. Dexterity is fragile in cold. You do not waste it. You remember reading that some trappers slept with gloves, partially on fingers free, but palms covered to preserve function. Tonight you choose full coverage, but you keep your knife positioned so it can be used even with mitts. Weapons are not only for animals or people, they are for cutting frozen straps, clearing ice, adjusting gear without fumbling. The frontier blurred categories. Survival tools slept beside you because the night did not announce what kind of problem it would present. You listen again, half asleep now, half alert. A sound brushes the edge of awareness. Not close, not concerning. You do not reach for anything. You note it and let it pass. This restraint matters. Overreacting burns energy. Underreacting invites danger. Balance again. A curious detail appears in one mountain ledger, where a man noted sleeping with his rifle unloaded during extreme cold. Powder became unreliable. Metal snapped. In the dark, accidents happened. He trusted his knife more for immediate needs. This practical adaptation contradicts romantic images, but it reflects lived reality. You consider that as you settle. The right tool is situational. You adjust your bedroll slightly to ensure nothing presses uncomfortably against your ribs. Pain wakes you. Waking cold costs warmth. Everything is connected. You smooth the canvas back into place, ensuring access points remain clear. Historians still debate how often mountain men actually faced nighttime threats. Predators were real, but avoidance was common. Most animals avoided camps. Human conflict was rarer than stories suggest. Yet readiness persisted. Habit outlasted necessity. Better prepared than surprised. Your breathing deepens again. The knife's presence fades into background awareness. This is how it should be. Tools are not meant to dominate thought. They are meant to wait quietly until called. There is a fringe practice mentioned by a handful of trappers who slept with a small stone or metal object in hand, claiming it helped them wake faster if startled. The cold shock focused the mind. Whether this helped or simply disrupted sleep remains uncertain. You keep your hands warm instead. You prefer gradual waking to panic. You think briefly about how modern life separates rest from readiness. Phones on chargers across rooms, doors locked, threats abstracted. Out here, the separation collapses. Rest and readiness coexist. You find the combination oddly calming. The night deepens further. Stars wheel slowly overhead, unseen now, behind closed eyes. Your body recognizes the steadiness. No sudden drafts, no creeping dampness. Tools remain untouched. That is success. You wake briefly, just long enough to check sensation. Fingers respond, toes flex, breath steady. You touch the knife handle once, not because you need it, but because the ritual completes the check. Everything is where it should be. You let go again. A widely accepted observation among frontier scholars is that ritual replaced routine in unpredictable environments. Rituals anchored the mind when conditions shifted. Your quiet checks serve that purpose now. They ground you. You drift again, sleep coming in layers. Light then heavier, then light once more. Each time you surface, nothing has changed. This consistency allows deeper rest to follow. The tools remain still. The night remains patient. You are not hunted. You are not hunting. You are simply existing correctly, within a narrow margin. Your last thought before deeper sleep settles is not fear but confidence, not arrogance, quiet confidence built on preparation. If something happens, you will wake. If nothing happens, you will rest. The tools sleep with you, not as threats but as companions, silent, ready, unobtrusive. And with that assurance humming softly beneath consciousness, sleep finally thickens, carrying you gently onward into the long mountain night. Hunger does not always announce itself with noise. Sometimes it arrives as cold, a hollow feeling that has nothing to do with emptiness and everything to do with fuel. You learn often sooner than expected that what you eat before sleep decides how the night unfolds. Calories are not indulgence out here. They are insulation you carry inside your own body. You feel the quiet weight of earlier food settling now. Not heavy, not uncomfortable, just present. This was intentional. Long experience taught mountain men that going to bed hungry in winter was a gamble few won. The body needs something to burn when movement stops. Shivering is expensive. Heat generation without fuel fails quickly. Accounts from frontier winters frequently mention evening meals, planned with unusual care. Stews thick with fat, dense breads, rendered grease added almost casually to otherwise simple food. These choices were not about taste, they were about duration. Slow-release energy carried a body through the longest hours before dawn. You notice how your warmth feels different tonight. It does not spike and fade, it holds steady. This is the sign of proper timing. Eat too much and digestion steals rest. Eat too little and the cold creeps in. The balance is learned, not taught. You feel it now in the evenness of your breath. There is a small, almost humorous detail tucked into a trader's journal where a man described saving a strip of dried meat specifically to chew half asleep if he woke cold before morning. He called it eating the night. It sounds strange, but the logic holds. A few calories at the right moment could stop a dangerous chill without fully waking the body. You do not have that luxury tonight, but you understand the thinking. Researchers still explore how metabolic demands shaped sleep patterns in extreme cold. Some suggest that frequent waking was partially driven by hunger signals rather than danger alone. The line between the two blurred. You wake briefly now, not from fear, but from a subtle drop in warmth, then settle again as your body compensates. You think about modern advice warning against eating before bed. It makes you smile faintly. Out here, those rules invert. Night is not for fasting. It is for sustaining. You would rather digest than freeze. The smell of earlier food lingers faintly in your memory. Fat carries scent. That scent reminds you that you planned ahead. Planning reduces anxiety. Anxiety burns energy. Everything connects. A widely recognized pattern in mountain camp routines was the quiet nature of evening meals. No chatter, no lingering. Food was taken calmly, deliberately, often close to sleeping areas to preserve warmth. Conversation cost breath. Breath cost heat. You appreciate that silence now. You shift slightly, checking how your stomach feels. No tightness, no hunger pangs, just readiness. That readiness allows your muscles to relax further. The body trusts itself when fuel is available. There is an odd fringe belief mentioned in a few scattered letters that certain foods produced warmer dreams. Sweetened fats, alcohol in small amounts. While the physiological basis remains unclear, the belief persisted. Some men swore by a spoonful of sugar before sleep. Others avoided alcohol entirely, knowing it dulled awareness and increased heat loss later. You are glad you chose clarity over comfort. Scholarly discussion continues about how alcohol figured into frontier sleep practices. Some accounts praise it, others warn against it. Evidence suggests moderation mattered more than substance. Tonight you rely on simple calories and discipline. Your breathing settles into a deeper rhythm, now supported by internal warmth rather than external aid. The bedroll holds, the snow insulates, the food fuels, layers of preparation stack neatly. You wake again briefly, just long enough to notice that your hands are warm without clenching. This is a good sign. The body is not diverting blood aggressively. Circulation remains even. That means reserves are sufficient. The night feels less adversarial now. Not friendly, but predictable. You do not feel chased by the cold. You feel accompanied by it, moving alongside rather than against. You remember reading that some mountain men described food as the first blanket. Clothing came second. Bedding third. That hierarchy makes sense now. Without fuel, nothing else works properly. Your thoughts slow further. The edge of consciousness softens. Hunger stays quiet. Warmth remains steady. This is the window sleep waits for. As you drift, you feel gratitude for simple things. Fat, heat, stillness. They are not luxuries. They are agreements between body and environment. You upheld your side earlier. Now the night upholds its. Sleep deepens gently without force. Your body hums quietly, converting stored energy into warmth with practiced efficiency. The mountains do not notice. They do not need to. You float in that narrow band where rest and awareness coexist. If hunger returns, you will wake. If cold intrudes, you will adjust. For now, nothing demands attention. The last clear sensation before deeper sleep is a sense of internal steadiness. Not fullness, not heat, just balance. And in that balance, the long winter night loosens its grip just enough to let you rest. You learn quickly that solitude is optional, not automatic. Warmth changes the rules people pretend to live by. Out here, bodies are resources, not boundaries. The idea of sleeping alone feels less noble when the temperature keeps dropping. You stop framing closeness as comfort and start seeing it as arithmetic. You remember the first time this lesson landed. Not dramatically, just a quiet realization that two bodies under shared cover lose heat more slowly than one. Skin radiates warmth whether pride approves or not. The math does not care about personality. It only cares about surface area and shared air. Frontier accounts regularly describe shared sleeping arrangements that would make modern readers uncomfortable. Men sleeping shoulder to shoulder, feet overlapping, backs pressed together. These arrangements were not framed as intimacy. They were framed as efficiency. Heat pooled where bodies met, gaps vanished, wind lost entry points. You feel the memory of that closeness now, even if tonight you're alone. You curl inwards slightly, imagining where another person's warmth would settle. The body responds anyway, conserving heat in anticipation. Habit shapes physiology. There is a telling observation from a winter expedition where a leader noted that men slept better in pairs even when tents were available. The tent blocked wind but shared warmth stabilized temperature. Stability mattered more than peak warmth. This preference appears across regions and years, suggesting it was learned independently by many. You think about how social norms dissolve under pressure. Cold strips away politeness. What remains is function. No one apologizes for surviving. No one explains. They simply move closer when the night demands it. Scholars still discuss whether these shared arrangements influenced long-term social bonds among mountain men. Some argue it created trust. Others suggest it was purely transactional. The truth likely shifted night to night. Tonight warmth is enough. You adjust your bedroll slightly, reducing empty space inside it. Even without another body, minimizing volume helps. Less air to warm, less heat to lose. You press elbows closer to your ribs. Knees tuck. The posture mirrors shed sleeping even in solitude. There is a small, almost tender detail mentioned in one diary where a man described waking to find his companion had shifted closer during the night, wordlessly responding to the cold. No comment followed. No acknowledgement. The movement itself was communication. You understand that language now. Bodies speak first. You breathe slowly, imagining shared rhythm. When people sleep close, breathing often synchronizes unconsciously. That rhythm conserves energy. Even alone, you let your breath settle into an even cadence, pretending the pattern is shared. The effect is subtle but real. A fringe practice appears in a few scattered accounts, where men rotated sleeping positions through the night, when sharing bedding, taking turns on the outside edge, where heat loss was greater. This suggests not just cooperation, but planning. Survival demanded fairness even when everyone was exhausted. You consider how trust becomes literal in these moments. You trust someone not to steal heat without giving it back. You trust them to wake if something goes wrong. You trust that closeness will not become threat. These trusts were built quietly, night after night. Historical analysis often focuses on the rugged individualism of mountain men, but their nights tell a different story. Survival was collective when conditions demanded it. Individualism slept lightly. Cooperation slept warmer. You feel a faint ache in your shoulder and shift slightly, redistributing weight. Pressure points wake you. Waking wastes heat. You learn to adjust without breaking contact when sharing warmth. Tonight you practice that skill alone, minimizing movement, maximizing continuity. There is an interesting note in a fur company ledger describing how new arrivals resisted shared sleeping, at first only to request it later, after a few hard nights. Pride eroded quickly under frost. Experience rewrote values efficiently. Your thoughts drift briefly to modern sleeping habits, personal space, separate beds, climate control. You almost laugh. Out here, space is negotiable. Warmth is not. You feel calmer, knowing that if you were not alone, you would not be. That knowledge eases a tension you did not realize you were holding. Even imagined support steadies the nervous system. Researchers continue to debate how these shared practices influence sleep architecture. Some suggest deeper rest occurred due to thermal stability. Others note increased micro-awakenings due to movement. Both can be true. Survival does not require perfect sleep. It requires adequate sleep. You notice how your hands have relaxed further, fingers uncurling slightly. This tells you your body feels secure enough to release tension. Security, even temporary, invites rest. The night remains cold. That has not changed. What has changed is how you meet it. Alone or together, you have learned that isolation is optional when warmth is at stake. You sink deeper now, not into oblivion, but into a steady, shared imaginary stillness. The bedroll holds, snow insulates, your body conserves. If someone were here, you would share warmth without discussion. Since no one is, you share it with yourself as best you can. Sleep thickens gently, like frost forming slowly on the inside of a window. Quiet, gradual, unannounced. You drift carrying with you the understanding that survival was rarely solitary, even when the trail made it look that way. You learn to listen without sitting up. This skill does not arrive dramatically. It creeps in over nights when waking fully feels expensive and unnecessary. The dark teaches you to stay still, while awareness stretches outward. Your ears sharpen even as your body remains heavy and warm. Sound behaves differently at night in the mountains. It travels farther but thinner. Snow absorbs some frequencies and amplifies others. A snapped twig carries meaning. A shifting branch tells a different story. You begin sorting these signals without naming them. Dangerous sounds feel wrong immediately. Safe ones fade into background texture. Many first-hand winter narratives mention that experienced mountain men could identify animals, weather shifts, and human movement while barely opening their eyes. This was not described as talent, it was described as habit. Night after night of exposure train the nervous system to respond without panic. You practice that now. A faint scrape reaches you, not close, not urgent. Your breathing remains steady. You catalogue the sound and release it. Another noise follows. Wind brushing bark, predictable. You do not move. Movement wastes warmth and resets your insulation. There is a curious aside in one trapping journal, where a man described knowing his horse was restless before ever hearing it clearly. He sensed the pattern change in the night sounds. The rhythm broke. That disruption woke him fully. You listen for rhythm, now not volume. The world hums when nothing is wrong. Researchers continue to examine how this half-awake listening affected sleep quality over long seasons. Some propose it created a lighter form of rest. Others argue it increased overall safety enough to offset fatigue. The men themselves rarely complained. Survival rewrote priorities. Your ears strain slightly, then relax. You do not chase every sound. Chasing leads to exhaustion. Instead, you let noises present themselves. If they matter, they will persist. This approach shows up repeatedly in winter camp accounts, though often indirectly. Men wrote about waking only when something repeated itself. You remember reading that some trappers slept with their heads angled toward expected danger paths, such as trails or water sources. This positioning allowed earlier detection. Tonight you are not that strategic, but you note where sounds carry from. Your body adjusts subtly, orienting itself without instruction. A lesser-known detail appears in a missionary report describing indigenous sleepers waking silently at night, listening for long stretches, then settling back without speaking. The observer assumed fear. In reality, it was assessment. Listening was part of rest, not a break from it. You feel the difference now between anxious listening and practiced listening. Anxiety tightens muscles and sharpens breath. Practice does the opposite. It widens awareness while allowing the body to remain loose. You are learning the latter. The wind changes slightly. You note the direction shift by sound alone. The pitch changes. Snow brushes differently against canvas. This information registers without urgency. Wind direction matters, but it does not require immediate action. You file it away. Scholars still debate whether this listening state resembles modern concepts of light sleep or meditation. Labels matter less than outcomes. The outcome was survival through awareness, without exhaustion. You feel that balance holding steady now. You wake briefly, then realize you never fully slept. That realization does not trouble you. It reassures you. You could respond if needed. The bedroll remains warm. Your hands are responsive. Tools remain where they belong. A quirky practice mentioned in a few scattered letters describes men deliberately listening for the absence of sound rather than presence. Total silence often meant heavy snowfall or dangerous stillness before a storm. Soundless nights required attention. You notice tonight is not silent. That comforts you. That your breathing deepens again. Listening becomes passive. Sounds pass through awareness like clouds across the moon. You do not hold on to them. You let them drift. There is a moment when a noise nearly wakes you fully. Something heavier shifts in the distance, large but not close. You imagine an animal adjusting its position, bedding down for the night. The sound does not repeat. You let it go. You realize how much energy this skill saves. Standing watch all night would destroy you. Sleeping blindly would end you. This middle ground keeps you functional. Many mountain men survived precisely because they mastered this balance. Historical discussions often emphasize physical endurance, but sensory endurance mattered just as much. Learning not to overreact preserved strength. Learning not to ignore preserved life. You feel your jaw unclench, shoulders sink further. Listening no longer feels like effort. It feels like presence. You are here, awake enough, asleep enough. The snow continues falling softly. That sound becomes the dominant rhythm. It blankets sharper noises, smoothing the night. Your ears adapt, filtering what matters from what does not. You think briefly of modern nights filled with artificial hums and constant alerts. You almost feel relief at the simplicity here. Sound has meaning again. Silence has meaning too. Nothing competes for attention. Your body drifts deeper this time. Listening does not stop. It simply moves to the background. Awareness hums quietly beneath sleep, like a pilot light. If something changes, you will surface. If nothing does, rest will continue. This trust allows your nervous system to stand down slightly. That surrender invites deeper recovery. You float there neither fully asleep nor fully awake, suspended in a calm vigilance that feels surprisingly restful. The night accepts this arrangement. It does not demand more. Your last clear sensation before deeper sleep is sound itself softened by snow, and distance holding you gently in place. The mountains speak quietly. You listen just enough. You stop expecting sleep to behave politely. The idea of lying down once and waking at dawn fades quickly out here. Night does not arrive as a single block. It stretches, loosens, folds back on itself. You drift, surface, adjust, and drift again. This rhythm is not failure. It is design. You wake without reason at first. No sound, no cold shock. Just a gentle return to awareness, like floating upward through dark water. Your eyes stay closed. Your body remains still. You take inventory without moving. Hands warm, feet responsive, breath steady. Nothing demands action. You let yourself sink again. Many winter journals describe this pattern without emphasis, as if it were unremarkable. Men wrote about waking often, listening, adjusting, then sleeping again. They did not complain about it. They expected it. Continuous sleep was a luxury associated with walls and stoves, not snow and wind. You notice how each waking feels different. Early in the night, awareness feels sharp alert. Later it softens. Thoughts blur at the edges. Time loses structure. You could not say how long you were asleep or awake. That no longer matters. There is a curious note in a trapping account where a man described night as a series of small rests stitched together. He did not use the word sleep. He used settle. That distinction feels accurate now. You are settling repeatedly, not collapsing once. Researchers still explore whether this segmented rest offered advantages beyond survival. Some suggest it allowed regular checks on heat weather and surroundings. Others propose it reduced the shock of sudden waking. The body never dropped too deeply to respond quickly. You feel that readiness now. It is not tiring, it is reassuring. You wake again this time because your shoulder feels slightly cool. You do not sit up. You do not open your eyes. You slide fabric a finger width, sealing a gap. The change registers immediately. Warmth returns. You settle again. This adjustment takes seconds and costs almost nothing. A small but telling detail appears in a missionary diary describing how indigenous sleepers woke briefly at regular intervals through the night, sometimes without fully opening their eyes. The observer mistook this for restlessness. In reality, it was maintenance. Sleep was treated like a fire that needed occasional tending. You smile faintly at that thought. You're tending your sleep now, feeding it small corrections so it lasts until morning. Time becomes strange. You dream lightly, then wake. You wake, then dream. Images drift in without narrative. Snow falling inside snow. Warm hands in cold air. Movement without effort. These are not stories, they are impressions. They pass without clinging. Scholars continue to debate whether such sleep patterns affected memory or mood. Evidence is scattered. What is clear is that people adapted. The human body is flexible when it must be. Comfort standards shift quickly under pressure. You wake again. This time, you listen more actively. The wind has shifted slightly. Snow sounds denser. The world feels quieter, as if sealed. You note it and let go. No action required. There is an odd, fringe belief mentioned in a few letters, that waking frequently kept the spirit from wandering too far in the cold. The writers did not explain this clearly. It reads like metaphor rather than superstition. You interpret it as caution expressed poetically. Staying lightly connected to the body mattered. Your breathing deepens as sleep thickens between wakeful moments. Each return feels easier. The bedroll holds heat more efficiently now. Your body has warmed it fully. Adjustments grow smaller. You no longer feel frustration at waking. There is nothing to resist. Resistance wastes energy. Acceptance conserves it. This understanding arrives quietly without triumph. Another waking comes. You stretch your toes, gently restoring circulation. You do not stretch fully. Full stretching exposes skin and costs warmth. You keep it contained. You feel blood move. You settle again. Historical analysis often frames these nights as harsh and exhausting. That is true in part, but there is also a strange gentleness in the rhythm. Night becomes a conversation rather than a battle. Wake, listen, adjust, rest, repeat. You float through this cycle several times. Each time the edges of awareness soften further. Sleep grows heavier in the spaces between waking. The body trusts the pattern now. Toward what you assume is the middle of the night, waking becomes rarer. When it happens, it feels distant, as if observed through fog. You adjust almost unconsciously. The bedroll shifts, fabric seals. You do not fully surface. Your dreams become slightly more coherent. Shape suggests stories but never quite form them. You are not chased. You are not falling. You are simply moving through cold landscapes without discomfort. Even dreams have adapted. A final waking arrives. You listen. Everything feels steady. No drafts, no sharp sounds, no urgent signals. This time, when you settle again, sleep does not loosen its grip quickly. You sink deeper, carried by the accumulated success of dozens of small decisions made earlier. This is not the dramatic rest of exhaustion. It is the earned rest of alignment. Night continues, but it no longer presses. You are moving with it now, drifting through its long pauses stitched together by brief purposeful awakenings. And somewhere between one breath and the next, you pass into a deeper, quieter sleep, held there, not by chance but by habit. Sweat becomes a quiet enemy you learn to respect. It does not sting or shout, it waits. Earlier movement felt necessary, adjusting gear, stamping feet, building warmth. Now, as sleep deepens and the night settles into its longest stretch, restraint becomes the skill that matters most. You feel it first as a temptation, a brief urge to pull layers tighter, to curl harder, to generate just a little more heat. You resist. Too much heat now will betray you later. Moisture trapped inside clothing has nowhere to go. When activity stops, that moisture cools quickly, and the cold returns sharper than before. Winter survival accounts repeatedly mention men waking chilled, not because of falling temperatures, but because of dampness. They created themselves. Sweat froze, fabric stiffened, heat vanished. The lesson spread fast among those who survived more than one season. Warmth must be earned slowly, never forced. You lie still breathing evenly. You allow yourself to feel slightly cool rather than aggressively warm. This balance feels counterintuitive at first, but your body recognizes it. Shivering does not start. Muscles remain relaxed. Circulation stays steady. This is the zone you want. There is a small detail noted in a lesser-known journal where a trapper described loosening his bedding slightly when he felt too warm, even though the night was brutal. He trusted the insulation to hold baseline warmth rather than spike it. That trust came from experience. You are learning the same lesson now. Scholars still examine how early frontiersmen understood thermoregulation without formal knowledge. Some suggest it was instinct sharpened by repetition. Others argue it was communal knowledge, passed quietly through observation. However it arrived, it stayed. You wake briefly and notice a faint dampness near your neck. Not wet, just warm. You respond immediately, but gently. You open a small vent, letting excess heat escape. Cold air brushes in, brief and controlled. The dampness fades. You reseal. The entire adjustment takes seconds. Crisis avoided. Your breathing slows again. This maintenance is becoming automatic. You no longer think through steps. Your hands act, then stillness returns. This is how skills embed themselves deeply enough to function in half sleep. A curious practice mentioned in a few scattered letters describes men deliberately allowing themselves to cool slightly before sleep to prevent sweating later. It was not framed scientifically, but it worked. You feel the wisdom of that choice now. You are cool, not cold, alert, not tense. The night remains steady. Snow insulates, wind stays manageable. The greatest variable now is you, your metabolism, your movement, your restraint. You feel oddly proud of this quiet discipline. No one sees it, no one praises it, but it keeps you alive. Researchers continue to debate how many nighttime deaths were caused by poor moisture management, rather than exposure alone. Evidence suggests it was significant. Cold kills faster when helped by dampness. Avoiding sweat was as important as blocking wind. You flex your fingers slightly, checking sensation. Still good. No stiffness, no numbness. That tells you moisture has not crept where it should not. You relax again. There is a gentle hum inside your chest now, the feeling of steady heat production. Not intense, sustainable. You imagine it like a small coal rather than a flame. That image feels right. Flames flare and die, coals endure. You drift deeper again, sleep thickening around awareness. Dreams flicker, then fade. Waking moments shorten. Each time you surface, nothing requires attention. That consistency builds confidence. Another waking arrives. This time your feet feel slightly too warm. You do not kick off layers. That would expose too much skin. Instead you shift position, increasing airflow subtly within the bedroll. The warmth evens out. Sweat does not form. Balance restored. Historical accounts often describe winter sleepers as appearing almost motionless for hours at a time. This was not stiffness, it was strategy. Stillness preserves dryness. Dryness preserves heat. Heat preserves life. You notice how your muscles have stopped clenching entirely. This tells you your body trusts the system. Trust reduces unnecessary movement. Movement creates moisture. The loop closes. Your breathing grows deeper, slower. The night stretches on, but it no longer feels endless. You are managing it moment by moment, often without fully waking. A final brief thought surfaces before deeper sleep returns. Cold is not defeated by force. It is managed by restraint. Tonight, restraint is your strongest tool. Sleep takes you again, smoother this time, carried by the quiet success of knowing when not to act. The mountains remain cold, you remain dry, and in that simple equation, survival rests easily through the long dark hours. Your feet demand attention long before the rest of you complains. They are closest to the ground. They sweat easily. They dry slowly. If something goes wrong here, the night will not forgive you. You have learned that by now, even if no one ever spelled it out. You feel them first as pressure rather than cold. A subtle awareness that something is pressing where it should not. A seam, a wrinkle, a fold of fabric that shifted earlier when you moved. You do not ignore it. Ignoring small discomforts is how they grow into problems that wake you fully later. Many winter narratives from the fur trade quietly emphasize foot care without drama. Men wrote about feet the way sailors wrote about hulls. If they failed, everything else followed. Boots, socks, and how they were treated at night mattered as much as any shelter choice. You made a decision earlier about your boots, and now you revisit it mentally. They are not on your feet, but they are close. Close enough that you could reach them without sitting up. This arrangement appears again and again in historical descriptions. Boots worn all night trapped moisture. Boots left too far away froze solid by morning. The compromise kept them usable. There is a peculiar observation in one mountain ledger describing men placing boots upright with toes angled toward the fire, or residual warmth even when no fire burned. The idea was to keep leather from stiffening unevenly. You copied the positioning without consciously thinking about it. Habit spreads faster than instruction. Your socks feel dry. You check by flexing your toes, slowly feeling fabric respond. No sticking, no cold patches. That tells you moisture has not built up dangerously. You relax again. This check becomes part of your waking rhythm now. Scholars still examine how frostbite incidents clustered around feet and hands rather than core body temperature. Evidence suggests extremities suffered first not only because of exposure, but because they were often neglected until too late. Mountain men learned to prioritize them quietly. You think briefly about the idea of removing socks at night to dry them against skin. Some accounts describe men doing exactly that, tucking damp socks into their shirts or underarms to dry using body heat. It worked, but it required discipline and tolerance for discomfort. Tonight your socks remain dry. You are grateful. A curious detail appears in a letter where a trapper described stuffing dry grass or spare cloth into boots overnight to absorb moisture and prevent freezing. It sounds improvised, but it worked. Resourcefulness mattered more than elegance. You consider your own boots, again satisfied with their placement. The cold presses upward through the ground steadily. Your bedroll and insulation blunt it, but your feet feel it first. You respond by drawing them closer together, sharing warmth between them. The posture feels natural now. Heat shared is heat saved. You wake briefly and realize your feet are too warm. That realization would have terrified you earlier. Now you understand the nuance. Too warm risks moisture. You adjust, subtly shifting your lower legs to allow a whisper of airflow inside the bedroll. The warmth evens out. No sweating begins. You seal the space again. Historical discussions sometimes mention that experienced winter travelers judged their overall condition by how their feet felt. Warm core with cold feet meant trouble coming. Warm feet with steady core meant balance. You perform that assessment instinctively now. Your toes twitch once, then relax. Circulation remains good. This tells you your body is not diverting blood aggressively. You are not in survival mode. You are in maintenance mode. That distinction matters. There is a fringe habit described in a few scattered journals where men slept with boots partially unlaced and socks doubled, allowing them to step directly into boots without fully dressing if needed. The method varied, but the intention was consistent. No fumbling in the dark, no exposure longer than necessary. You imagine waking to an emergency, fire dying, wind shifting, a sound too close. In that moment, your feet must work immediately. You picture standing, walking, running if needed. The image does not create anxiety. It reassures you. You are prepared. Your breathing deepens again as the thought fades. Preparation replaces fear. This is a recurring theme tonight. Every system accounted for removes one more reason to stay tense. You notice how the smell of leather and wool mingles faintly inside the bedroll. These smells tell you things are dry. Damp smells different. Sharp, sour. This is steady, reliable. Researchers continue to debate how often foot injuries ended expeditions prematurely. Diaries suggest it was common. A man with damaged feet could not trap, could not travel, could not survive winter movement. Protecting feet at night preserved the next day. You shift again, not because of discomfort, but because your body is cycling naturally through light waking. You flex your ankles, gently restoring circulation without breaking warmth. The motion is small controlled. It costs little. Snow continues to fall softly outside. That muffled sound reaches you faintly. It tells you the temperature is stable. Snowfall often brought slightly warmer air. You file that away subconsciously. Your feet feel balanced now. Not hot, not cold. Present, but not demanding. This allows the rest of you to let go further. You drift again deeper this time. Dreams brush the edges of awareness, walking through snow without sinking. Boots light on your feet, ground firm beneath. Even your dreams are practicing. A final brief waking arrives. You test sensation one last time. Toes respond immediately. Good. You settle again without thought. The night stretches on, but this part of it feels handled. Feet protected, boots managed, movement possible, nothing urgent. As sleep thickens, you understand something that took many men's seasons to learn. Night survival is not one big decision. It is dozens of small ones repeated until they become invisible. Your feet rest quietly, now wrapped dry alive. That quiet success allows the rest of you to rest as well. And in that unremarkable victory, sleep deepens, carrying you gently forward toward whatever the mountains will bring with dawn. You begin to trust animals more than silence. Silence can lie. Animals rarely do. They react before you sense change, and they do it without overthinking. Out here, that makes them better night watchmen than any human trying to stay awake through cold hours. If you have a horse nearby, you notice its breathing first. Slow, steady breaths mean calm. A sudden shift in weight, a stamp, a low snort, tells you something has changed, long before your own senses catch up. Dogs work the same way. They sleep lightly, ears flicking, even when bodies remain still. Their rest is alert by default. Numerous winter travel accounts mention that mountain men relied on their animals' behavior as an early warning system. Horses tied too tightly became restless. Dogs that slept too deeply worried their owners. Animals were not companions in the modern sense. They were extensions of awareness. You picture a dog curled near the edge of camp nose, tucked tail wrapped close. Even asleep it listens. Even dreaming it knows what does not belong. You understand now why men tolerated the extra work animals required. Feed, care, risk. In exchange, you gained another set of senses that never fully shut off. There is a fascinating note in one frontier diary where a man described waking instantly because his dog's breathing changed rhythm. No bark, no growl, just a pause where sound should have been. That absence carried meaning. You start listening for patterns rather than events. Scholars still examine how much this animal-based vigilance reduced nighttime incidents. Quantifying it is difficult. What is clear is that men who travelled with animals felt less pressure to maintain constant personal alertness. That relief mattered. Rest is easier when shared. You lie still imagining how an animal would respond to the night around you. Wind is normal. Snow is normal. A distant owl is normal. Sudden silence is not. Erratic movement is not. Your mind begins to adopt the same filters. There is an odd fringe habit mentioned in a few letters where trappers claimed certain dogs could sense storms, hours before weather shifted. Whether this was true sensitivity or learned pattern recognition remains debated, but men trusted it enough to act. Camps were moved, fires were banked, bedding was rearranged. Trust earned through repetition becomes hard to argue with. You think about how animals sleep differently from humans. They do not expect 8 uninterrupted hours. They nap, wake, adjust, nap again. This mirrors your own pattern tonight. Perhaps that similarity is part of the bond. You are syncing with the same environment. A widely accepted observation in frontier studies is that men traveling without animals reported higher stress at night, even when no threats appeared. The mind works harder when it knows it is alone. Animals distribute that burden. You wake briefly and listen more actively. No animal sounds tonight, only wind and snow. You do not feel exposed. You feel aware. The idea of an unseen perimeter settles your nerves, even when it exists only in memory. There is a practical aspect too. Animals generate heat. Dogs slept near men, not for affection, but for shared warmth. This was mutually beneficial. Body heat pooled, energy conserved, boundaries blurred. Survival rewrote etiquette. You smile faintly, imagining a dog shifting closer during the coldest hour, pressing into shared insulation. No conversation, no negotiation, just physics. Researchers continue to debate how much animals influenced sleep depth. Some argue their movements disrupted rest. Others note the reassurance they provided allowed deeper sleep overall. Both are likely true. Trade-offs define survival. You feel the night deepen again. The snow outside muffles sound further. The world feels smaller, closer. In this kind of quiet, animals would stand out immediately if something changed. That knowledge allows your body to relax. Your breathing slows, muscles loosen. You're not guarding the perimeter alone. Even imagined partnership reduces tension. The nervous system responds to perceived support, whether human or animal. There is a brief moment when you think you hear movement. You do not react immediately. You wait for repetition. Nothing follows. The sound dissolves into wind. You release it. This patience reflects learned behavior. Animals do not chase every stimulus. They conserve energy. They react only when patterns persist. You adopt that strategy now. Historical discussions sometimes romanticize the bond between mountain men and their animals. The reality was practical and often harsh. Animals were worked hard, lost often, yet the reliance was genuine. Night survival depended on shared vigilance. You drift again, sleep thickening around awareness. Dreams come and go, shallow and brief. You surface once more, listening, then settle again without thought. Toward the later hours of the night, you sense a shift in air pressure. Subtle, barely there. Animals would notice this. You notice it too faintly. Weather turning. Nothing dangerous yet, just change. You adjust your bedroll slightly, sealing one edge more tightly. This is not panic. It is response. Animals would reposition. You do the same. The idea settles that you are part of a larger system tonight. Snow insulating, wind diverted, body heat conserved, awareness distributed. Animals, whether present or remembered, complete the circle. Your last clear thought before deeper sleep returns is simple. You are not alone out here, even when you are. The night is full of listeners. Knowing that lets you rest. Sleep takes you again, deeper now, carried by the quiet confidence that someone or something would notice before danger reached you. And in that shared vigilance, the long mountain night loosens its hold just a little more. Dreams change when cold presses close. They lose colour first, then detail. What remains are shapes, movements, sensations without narrative. You notice this as you surface briefly from sleep, aware that something passed through your mind without leaving a clear trace. This does not bother you. It feels appropriate somehow, as if the mind has simplified itself to match the environment. You drift again and dream of walking without effort. Snow does not resist your steps. The ground feels firm, supportive. There is no slipping, no sinking. This is not realism. It is reassurance. The body uses dreams to practice comfort, when waking life offers little of it. Ethnographic notes from northern expeditions often remark that people sleeping in extreme cold reported fewer elaborate dreams. Instead, they described impressions, motion, temperature, direction. The mind conserved energy the way the body did, trimming excess imagery. You feel that trimming now. Thoughts become lighter, easier to release. You wake briefly aware of the dream without remembering it. Your heart rate is steady. No fear lingered. That tells you the dream served its purpose. It soothed rather than stirred. You settle again easily. There is a curious anecdote recorded by a physician attached to a fur company who observed that men reported fewer nightmares in winter camps than during travel seasons. He speculated that physical exhaustion explained it. Others later suggested that constant low-level alertness prevented the mind from plunging too deeply into dream states where anxiety could spiral. The debate remains unresolved. You notice how your dreams, when they appear, stay close to physical sensation. Warmth, pressure, stillness. You do not dream of cities or faces. You dream of states, being held, being steady. This feels like the mind aligning itself with the body's priorities. Another waking arrives. You listen. Nothing has changed. You drift again, and this time the dream returns quickly, as if waiting nearby. You're inside a shelter made of snowlight filtering through thick walls. You feel safe, insulated. This image appears without context. It dissolves without explanation. Scholars still debate whether such dream content reflects learned experience or inherited pattern recognition. Some argue the human mind retains deep memory of shelter-seeking behaviors. Others suggest recent exposure dominates. Tonight the distinction feels academic. The dream helped, that is enough. You wake again, not fully, just enough to feel your jaw unclench. Tension you did not realize was there melts away. Dreams can do that. They release what waking awareness holds tight. There is a fringe belief mentioned in a few scattered accounts that cold dreams warned of coming danger. Men claimed certain dream sensations preceded storms or illness. Evidence is thin, but the belief persisted. Perhaps it reflected heightened bodily awareness rather than prophecy. You listen to your body now. Nothing signals alarm. Your breathing deepens further. Sleep thickens between dreams. The cycles stretch longer. You are no longer surfacing as often. The systems you set earlier are holding. That stability invites deeper rest. Dreams return again, faint and slow. You are lying somewhere familiar, not moving, just existing. Time feels stretched. There is no urgency. This mirrors your actual condition, so closely that dream and reality blur for a moment. When you wake, you are not disoriented, you are simply present. Historical analysis sometimes suggests that dream deprivation contributed to mental strain among winter travellers. Yet first-hand accounts rarely mention distress about dreaming. Survival focused attention elsewhere. The mind adapted. You feel that adaptation happening now. Dreams become background processes, not events. You wake once more and realize you have been asleep longer this time. The coldest hours may be passing. Your body feels heavier, more settled. Muscles have stopped twitching. This tells you rest has deepened. There is a gentle satisfaction in this realization. Not joy, not relief, just acknowledgement. The night is progressing. You are progressing with it. You drift again. Dreams thin out. When they appear, they are quieter, more abstract. Light moving behind closed eyes, a sense of floating. No images attach themselves long enough to matter. Researchers continue to explore how prolonged cold exposure affects REM cycles. Studies are inconclusive. What matters here is function. You are resting enough to continue. Perfect sleep was never the goal. Another brief waking arrives. You swallow once, throat dry, but not painfully so. You adjust your breathing to moisten it slightly. Small maintenance, then stillness returns. The snow outside continues its work. Insulating, quieting, sealing. You are cocooned in layers of decision and chance. That cocoon supports deeper sleep now. Your dreams fade almost entirely. Sleep becomes heavy and dark, but not frightening. There is no sensation of falling or being chased, just absence. This is the deepest rest you have known tonight. When awareness flickers again, it feels distant, like a thought overheard from another room. You do not fully wake, you adjust nothing. Everything is already arranged. You sink back immediately. The mind lets go. The body remains warm enough, dry enough, alert enough beneath the surface. This balance allows true rest to arrive. The mountains remain cold. They remain indifferent. Inside your small, carefully managed world, sleep holds steady. Dreams have done their quiet work. Awareness hums softly beneath them. You pass the deepest part of the night not with drama but with stillness. And in that stillness shaped by cold and adaptation, your mind and body rest together, preparing for whatever light will eventually bring. Illness waits until night to reveal itself. During the day, movement hides weakness. Muscles stay warm. Blood moves. Pain stays quiet. At night, when everything slows, small problems surface. You learn this not from theory, but from listening to your own body in the dark. You wake with a faint awareness that something feels off. Not pain, not fear, just imbalance. Your breathing feels slightly heavier than earlier. Your chest rises a little more slowly. You notice without alarm. Panic would only waste energy. Instead, you assess. Historical winter records frequently note that sickness was most dangerous after sundown. Fever spiked when bodies stopped moving. Chills followed when sweat cooled. Without daylight or activity to mask symptoms, night exposed vulnerabilities quickly. Many men learn to monitor themselves quietly during these hours. You check your temperature indirectly. Are you sweating? No. Are you shivering? No. Is your breathing labored slightly but steady? That steadiness matters. Illness announces itself through pattern, not single sensations. There is a small detail in a fur company letter where a man described listening for the sound of his own breath at night, using rhythm rather than volume to judge his condition. If breath stayed regular, he rested. If it faltered, he acted. You adopt that method now, counting nothing, simply noticing consistency. Scholars still debate how much frontier illness stemmed from exposure versus nutrition versus exhaustion. The causes blended together. What mattered most at night was early response. Small adjustments could prevent cascading failure. You adjust your position slightly, elevating your upper body by a fraction. This eases breathing without exposing skin. The change feels subtle but helpful. You do not sit up. Sitting up costs warmth. You work within the system you built. Another waking follows. Your mouth feels dry. This could mean nothing. It could mean fever. You test by breathing slowly through your nose, feeling air move evenly. No dizziness, no sharp chills. You relax again. There is an unusual practice mentioned in a missionary account where winter travellers slept with a hand placed lightly on the chest of a sick companion, feeling for irregular breathing rather than listening. Sound travelled poorly in snow-heavy camps. Touch told the truth. Alone tonight, you substitute awareness for touch, staying connected to your own rhythm. You think briefly about how dangerous dampness becomes when illness enters the picture. Fever produces heat, but sweat steals it when fever breaks. You remain vigilant about moisture. You adjust a vent again, ensuring excess warmth can escape without inviting cold. Researchers continue to explore how night care practices evolved in isolated camps. Without medicine, prevention mattered more than cure. Managing heat, dryness, and rest was the primary treatment. You're practicing that now. Your breathing evens out again. The heaviness fades slightly. Perhaps it was nothing more than a momentary dip in energy. Perhaps your body simply asked for attention and received it. Either way, the response worked. You drift again, lighter sleep returning. This time you surface not because of discomfort, but because you want to check again. This checking does not feel anxious. It feels responsible. A quirky detail appears in one winter journal where a man described whispering his own name softly when he felt unwell at night, just to confirm clarity. If the name sounded wrong, he would wake fully. You do not whisper, but you run through a familiar phrase silently. It feels intact. Good. The cold presses gently. Your bedroll holds. Snow insulates. Nothing external has changed. Internal balance matters more now. You listen inwardly rather than outwardly. Historians still discuss how many winter deaths occurred quietly in sleep due to untreated illness. Numbers are unclear. What is clear is that vigilance saved some. Early recognition mattered. You swallow again, throat less dry now. Moisture redistributes, breathing deepens. Your chest feels looser. The body often corrects small imbalances when given time and calm. You shift your shoulders slightly, ensuring no pressure restricts airflow. The movement is slow, economical. You settle again. Another dream flickers briefly, but you do not follow it. Awareness stays closer to the surface tonight. That feels appropriate. Illness demands respect, not fear. You wake once more, testing fingers and toes. Warm, responsive. Circulation holds. Fever would disrupt this. You relax further. The night continues, but the sense of threat recedes. You handled the moment without drama. This builds confidence, not bravado, quiet assurance that you can respond when needed. Researchers sometimes describe this as embodied knowledge. The body learns what to do before the mind names it. You feel that learning deepen now. Sleep returns heavier than before, but still light enough to surface if needed. You float in that space, balanced between rest and readiness. The mountains remain indifferent. Illness remains possible. But for now, the system holds. Heat balanced, moisture controlled, breathing steady. As you drift deeper again, the thought surfaces briefly and fades. Night reveals weakness, but it also offers time to correct it. You took that time. That is enough. Sleep settles back around you, careful and quiet, carrying you through another stretch of darkness, while your body continues its unseen work, adjusting, repairing, enduring. There are nights when the safest thing you can do is nothing at all. Storm nights teach this lesson with uncomfortable clarity. Movement feels productive. It feels brave. It feels like control. But when wind howls and snow thickens into a solid presence, stillness becomes strategy. You sense it before it fully arrives. Pressure changes in the air. Sound flattens. Snow no longer falls softly, but presses, accumulating with intent. The wind does not gust, it commits. This is the kind of night that punishes travel and rewards patience. Many winter accounts from mountain regions describe storms not as sudden events, but as conditions that slowly close in, like a door being shut room by room. Men who tried to outpace them often failed. Those who stayed put, conserving heat and energy, survived more reliably. This pattern appears so often it reads like a rule. You lie still, resisting the urge to check everything again. Checking creates gaps. Gaps invite wind. You trust the decisions already made, ground chosen carefully, wind deflected, insulation layered, bedroll sealed, snow now working for you rather than against you. There is a lesser-known diary entry where a trapper described storm nights as tests of nerve rather than gear. The gear either worked or it did not. The real challenge was resisting unnecessary movement. He wrote that the hardest part was convincing himself that doing nothing was doing something. You feel that challenge now. Scholars continue to debate how many winter deaths occurred during storms due to panic rather than conditions alone. Evidence suggests that men who broke camp or moved excessively during severe weather fared worse. Energy expenditure without payoff was lethal. You remember this as you remain still. The sound outside grows louder, then oddly quieter. Snow thickens, absorbing the wind's edge. The world narrows. You feel enclosed, not trapped. This difference matters. Trapped implies danger. Enclosed implies shelter. You wake briefly, then decide not to adjust anything. Nothing feels wrong. Adjusting out of habit rather than necessity introduces risk. You breathe slowly, counting nothing, allowing your heart rate to settle. There is a curious belief mentioned in a few frontier letters that storms had phases, and that the worst thing a man could do was interrupt his own rest during the strongest part. These writers advised waiting until the storm showed signs of fatigue before acting. Whether meteorologically sound or not, the advice saved energy. You follow it instinctively. Your bedroll shifts slightly as snow presses against its outer surface. The pressure feels even supportive. No sharp drafts intrude. The insulation compresses just enough to seal gaps. You remain dry. This tells you everything you need to know. You listen without straining. Storm sounds are different from threat sounds. They are continuous, overwhelming, without pattern change. A predator's approach has rhythm. Human movement has hesitation. This is weather. It does not care about you. That indifference is oddly comforting. Historical observations often note that men who survived long winters learned to read storms the way sailors read seas. Not in detail, but in temperament. This storm feels steady, not violent. Steady storms can be waited out. You drift again, sleep returning in heavier waves now. The storm masks smaller noises, allowing deeper rest. Your body recognizes this opportunity and takes it. Another waking arrives. The pressure feels the same. Temperature stable. No moisture creeping. You do not move. You do not check tools. You trust placement. There is a fringe practice mentioned by a few trappers who claim to sleep through the worst storms, deliberately believing the body conserved energy better in unconsciousness. Modern readers might question this, but it aligns with what you feel now. Rest is fuel. Researchers still discuss how storm-induced barometric changes affected sleep depth. Some suggest deeper sleep occurred during prolonged storms. Others argue anxiety countered that effect. Tonight preparation has removed anxiety. Sleep deepens. Your breathing slows further. Muscles remain loose. You feel the bedroll holding shape despite accumulating snow. This resilience builds confidence. The storm continues. Hours pass without markers. Time dissolves into sound and breath. You are not counting minutes. You are simply existing correctly. You wake once more, briefly aware that you have not moved in a long time. This realization does not bring stiffness or pain. It brings reassurance. Stillness worked. The wind begins to lose its force. Not suddenly, gradually. The sound softens. Snowfall becomes gentler. The storm is tiring. You do not rise, you do not celebrate. You wait. Storms can pretend to leave before returning. Patience remains the rule. Eventually, sleep pulls you under again, deeper now, buoyed by the knowledge that you chose correctly. On nights like this, survival belongs not to the boldest, but to the stillest. The mountains rage and settle without noticing you. Inside your small, carefully managed space, warmth holds dryness remains, and energy is preserved. You let the storm do what it will. You do nothing. And in doing nothing, you endure. Before sleep fully claims you on any night, there is always a quiet rehearsal. It does not look like planning. It feels more like imagining without urgency. You picture waking suddenly and needing to move. You do this not to frighten yourself, but to remove surprise from the equation. Surprise wastes time. Time costs heat. You imagine the motion first, rolling to one side, knees drawing in, hands reaching where tools already wait, boots within arm's length. You do not sit up in this mental run-through. Sitting up exposes your core. You imagine standing only after everything else is ready. The sequence matters. Accounts from winter travel journals frequently describe men who practiced these scenarios mentally before sleep, especially when conditions felt unstable. They did not call it rehearsal. They simply described knowing what they would do if something happened. That knowing reduced hesitation. You feel how this mental practice calms the body rather than excites it. The nervous system relaxes when it understands a path forward. Uncertainty creates tension. Clarity releases it. You breathe deeper as the imagined sequence settles into familiarity. There is a curious detail recorded in a military observer's notes about frontier travel, where he remarked that seasoned mountain men always slept facing their most likely exit route. Not because they expected to flee, but because orientation reduced confusion upon waking. You check your own position now. You are angled well enough. Good. Scholars continue to discuss whether this constant preparedness increased long-term stress or reduced it. Evidence leans toward reduction. Knowing what to do, even in the abstract, prevented the mind from spinning through endless possibilities. One clear path is easier to carry than many vague fears. You imagine sound waking you, a sharp crack, a sudden silence. You picture how you would pause first, listening before acting. This pause is intentional. Immediate reaction can be wrong. Listening costs little. Acting costs much. There is a lesser-known anecdote in a trapping memoir where a man credited his survival to rehearsing what not to do. He resisted running blindly. He resisted shouting. He resisted lighting a sudden fire. In the dark, restraint often mattered more than speed. You absorb that lesson now. Your hands twitch slightly as you imagine gripping familiar tools. The sensation feels real enough to satisfy the mind. You do not need to actually move. Mental practice engages the same pathways with less cost. This understanding feels modern, but it was lived long before it was named. You let the images fade. The rehearsal is complete. You do not repeat it obsessively. Once is enough. Repetition would turn preparation into anxiety. You trust that the sequence will be there if needed. The night deepens again. Snow settles, wind behaves. Your body remains warm enough, dry enough. Nothing triggers the imagined scenario. That is success, not failure. You drift, then surface briefly, checking orientation once more. You know where you are. You know which way is out. You know where your boots and tools rest. That knowledge allows you to sink again, without resistance. A fringe practice mentioned in a few scattered accounts describes men who deliberately slept with their heads uncovered so they could orient visually the moment they opened their eyes. Others preferred darkness. Both approaches worked if consistent. Consistency mattered more than method. Tonight your choice feels right. You wake lightly again, this time because your mind completes another quiet check without calling attention to itself. Everything remains in place. Nothing has shifted unexpectedly. You relax further. Historical analysis often highlights dramatic escapes and emergencies, but most rehearsals never met reality. That was the point. Preparedness prevented escalation. Many dangers dissolved before becoming stories. You notice how your breathing has slowed to a deep, even pattern. This tells you the body no longer anticipates immediate threat. The rehearsal has done its work. The system trusts itself. You dream lightly of movement, not frantic, just purposeful. Walking through darkness without stumbling. Hands finding objects without searching. These dreams are not warnings, they are confirmations. Researchers still debate how much of this readiness transferred into waking performance. Some argue mental rehearsal improved reaction time. Others suggest it simply reduced panic. Either outcome helped. Panic is the real enemy at night. You drift again deeper now. The imagined paths fade completely. The bedroll holds you. Snow insulates. The night remains steady. A brief waking arrives near what feels like the late hours. You sense the cold has stabilized rather than deepened. This suggests the worst has passed. You smile faintly at the thought, then let it go. Dawn is not your concern yet. You realize something subtle. Because you rehearsed earlier, you are no longer subconsciously rehearsing now. The mind is free to rest. Preparation creates space for rest rather than competing with it. The mountains remain silent except for soft wind and settling snow. Nothing approaches, nothing demands action. Your imagined exit remains unused. You sleep more deeply now, buoyed by the quiet confidence that if something did require movement, you would not hesitate or thrash. You would simply act. That confidence does not make you reckless. It makes you still. Stillness preserves warmth. Warmth preserves life. As sleep thickens, the idea of emergency fades into background knowledge, like knowing how to swim without thinking about water. You do not expect to need it. You simply know it is there. The night carries on. You remain prepared. You remain resting. The two coexist without conflict. And in that balance shaped by countless cold nights before you rest, deepens, carrying you gently toward the final hours before morning. Loneliness grows louder at night. Cold strips away, distraction and darkness remove scale. Thoughts that stay quiet during daylight stretch out when nothing else competes with them. You notice this as you surface briefly, from sleep not frightened, just aware of absence. No voices, no movement, only your own breathing and the slow patience of the mountains. You expected this feeling earlier. It arrives later instead, after systems are in place and survival feels momentarily secure. Once the body relaxes, the mind has room to wander. You let it wander without chasing it. Many personal winter accounts describe loneliness as one of the hardest parts of long mountain seasons. Not fear, not hunger, isolation. Men wrote about missing the sound of ordinary conversation, even trivial complaints. At night, that absence became sharper. You feel that edge now. You shift slightly, not to escape the feeling, but to acknowledge it. Your bedroll creases softly. The sound reassures you that you exist. The body is a companion of sorts when no one else is near. There is an interesting observation in one trapping journal where a man noted that loneliness felt strongest when he was safest. During danger, attention narrowed. During calm, memory expanded. You understand that now. With no immediate threat, the mind looks inward. Scholars still debate whether prolonged isolation altered emotional regulation among mountain men. Some argue it hardened them. Others suggest it made them more sensitive. The writings hint at both. Cold sharpened edges, but it also deepened awareness. You remember earlier sections of the night. Decisions made, systems holding. Those thoughts anchor you. You are not adrift. You are placed deliberately in this moment, even if no one else shares it. A curious detail appears in a letter home, where a trapper admitted to talking softly to himself at night, not from fear, but to hear a human voice. He wrote that it helped him sleep. You do not speak aloud. You let your breath serve that purpose, audible enough to remind you that you're here. You listen again, not for danger, but for connection. Wind through trees, snow settling. These sounds are not human, but they are company. The world is active, even if it does not speak your language. You wake briefly again, feeling the loneliness crest and then recede. It behaves like cold itself. It presses, then stabilizes. You learn not to fight it. Fighting creates tension. Acceptance lets it pass. Historical discussions often frame mountain men as solitary by nature, but the reality appears more complicated. Many travelled in loose groups. Others sought winter camps with at least one partner. Complete isolation was rarely the goal. When it happened, it was endured, not celebrated. You imagine another sleeper nearby, not vividly, just the idea of shared presence. That idea alone calms the nervous system. Humans are wired for proximity. Even imagined proximity can ease stress. There is a fringe practice mentioned in a few diaries where men slept with personal items positioned as stand-ins for others. A pack placed close, a rifle leaned nearby. These objects created a sense of occupied space. You understand the instinct without needing to replicate it. Your breathing deepens again. Loneliness fades into background awareness. It does not disappear completely. It does not need to. It simply stops demanding attention. You drift into sleep again, lighter at first. Dreams brush the edges of awareness, this time carrying faint echoes of voices. Not words, just presence. You do not follow them. You rest within them. Researchers continue to explore how social isolation affected cognitive function in extreme environments. The evidence suggests adaptation occurred. Minds learned to self-soothe. Ritual replaced interaction. Night routines became companions. You wake again and notice that the feeling has softened. It no longer feels sharp. It feels distant, like a sound heard through snow. You acknowledge it and let it go. The night stretches on. You are not lost. You are not abandoned. You are simply alone in this moment, which is different. The distinction matters. You feel the bedroll holding steady. Snow insulates, wind stays gentle. These consistencies provide a framework that replaces human presence temporarily. Structure becomes comfort. A final brief thought surfaces before deeper sleep returns. Loneliness is not a signal of danger. It is a signal of awareness. You noticed it. You did not panic. You adapted. Sleep deepens again, smoother now. The mind settles into quieter territory. Thoughts thin out. Sensations blur. The sense of isolation loses its edge. The mountains remain vast, you remain small, but within your carefully managed space, you're held by layers of decision and habit. That holding allows rest. You drift through the later hours of night, with fewer interruptions now. Loneliness no longer wakes you. The body has accepted the situation. Acceptance frees energy. As sleep thickens, you feel something close to contentment. Not happiness, not joy, just steadiness. You are where you are prepared, you are resting. And in that quiet acceptance, the long winter night continues to loosen its grip, carrying you forward toward the subtle promise of morning light that still lies hours away. Mistakes teach faster than success ever could. You remember them not as stories, but as sensations. A sudden cold that should not have been there. Dampness where dryness was promised. Wind where you expected stillness. Improvised shelters gone wrong leave their lessons in the body long after the night passes. You recall one of those moments now, not vividly, but clearly enough. A shallow lean to break the wind that instead created a funnel. A hollow scooped hastily into snow that collected cold rather than blocking it. At the time, the logic felt sound. Only later did the flaw reveal itself quietly when sleep refused to come. Many winter survival accounts mention shelters built with confidence and abandoned with humility. Men wrote about snow walls that collapsed inward, canvas stretched too tight that snapped in cold, branch roofs that looked dense but let wind slip through unseen gaps. Each failure refined understanding more effectively than any success. You lie still now, benefiting from those remembered errors. The memory is not sharp, it does not sting, it simply informs. You no longer chase perfect shelter. You aim for adequate and honest. Overbuilt structures fail dramatically. Simple ones fail gently, giving warning before catastrophe. There is a curious anecdote in one trapping memoir where a man described sleeping worse inside a carefully constructed shelter than outside in the open. The shelter trapped moisture and blocked sound, leaving him blind and damp. When he moved out into open snow with a proper bedroll, he slept warmer and woke more aware. The lesson surprised him. It surprises you less now. Scholars continue to debate how much early shelter design borrowed from European tradition versus local adaptation. Evidence suggests a rapid shedding of old ideas. Stone and timber logic did not translate cleanly to snow and wind. Flexibility mattered more than permanence. You think about the urge to build something impressive. Walls, roofs, enclosures. That urge feels natural, but it often comes from daylight thinking. At night, especially in winter, enclosure can become confinement. Sound muffles, air stagnates, moisture builds. You learn to respect openness paired with insulation. Another mistake surfaces in memory. Packing snow too tightly against bedding. It felt solid, protective. Hours later, the cold crept in faster than expected. Compacted snow conducted heat away efficiently. Loose snow would have insulated. That difference became unforgettable after one long night of shivering regret. You adjust nothing now. The current arrangement has already passed several checks. Warmth steady, dryness maintained, sound available, nothing to fix. That absence of urgency is itself a lesson learned. There is a fringe story passed among trappers about a man who built an elaborate snow shelter that impressed everyone, only to abandon it by midnight because condensation soaked his bedding. The story circulated not to mock him, but to remind others that complexity invites hidden problems. You smile faintly at the thought. Historical analysis often highlights ingenuity on the frontier, but it rarely emphasizes how much of that ingenuity came from failure. Designs evolved because they failed safely enough to allow learning. Fatal mistakes taught nothing. Survivable ones taught everything. You wake briefly and feel gratitude for past discomfort. It sharpened judgment. It reduced unnecessary effort. You no longer equate effort with safety. You equate outcome with safety. Another lesson returns. Digging down feels intuitive. The ground seems solid, but cold pools in depressions. Many learned this by waking colder than expected. Elevation, even slight, mattered more than depth. You are elevated now, not by much, but enough. Researchers still discuss how much trial and error shaped frontier survival versus knowledge transfer. The answer appears to be both. Advice guided initial choices, experience refined them. You carry both tonight. You listen again. The night remains quiet but not silent. Sound flows. This tells you air moves gently. Stagnation breeds problems. You are glad you did not overbuild. There is a brief moment when you imagine changing something, just to improve it. You let the thought pass. Improvement is seductive. Stability is safer. Many mistakes begin as improvements. You remember another error. Blocking wind from one direction without considering swirl. Wind wraps around obstacles. It curls. It finds ways in. A single wall often creates more problems than it solves. Now you think in angles, not barriers. The bedroll holds shape. Snow insulates. Trees deflect wind without trapping it. This arrangement feels unremarkable. That is the highest compliment. You drift again, sleep returning more easily now. Mistakes stay in the background, not as regrets, but as quiet guardians. They prevent repetition. A short dream flickers. You're building something, then unbuilding it, hands moving calmly. There is no frustration, just adjustment. You wake without tension. Scholars sometimes argue that failure-based learning on the frontier created a uniquely pragmatic mindset. Ideals gave way to outcomes. This mindset shaped not just survival, but identity. You feel a trace of that pragmatism now. It is grounding. Another waking arrives. Nothing feels wrong. That absence is meaningful. Improvised shelters fail loudly. When they hold, they fade into the background. Your current setup has faded. You think briefly of those who did not get the chance to learn from mistakes. The thought passes without dwelling. Dwelling wastes energy. Respect is enough. The night deepens toward its later hours. Cold stabilizes. Snow settles. Wind stays predictable. The margin for error narrows, but your decisions have already been made. You rest within the confidence earned by experience, both yours and borrowed. Shelter is not about dominance, it is about alignment. Tonight you are aligned. Sleep thickens again, carrying you gently forward. Mistakes remain behind you, no longer painful, no longer loud. They have done their work. They stand watch quietly, now ensuring you do not repeat them. And in that quiet protection, born of nights that went wrong, so this one could go right, you rest more deeply, moving steadily through the long winter darkness toward the promise of morning. Knowledge travels softly at night. It does not arrive as lectures or declarations. It passes between people in pauses, in half sentences spoken close to the fire, in gestures more than words. You remember how these lessons were shared often when voices dropped and the day's work finally loosened its grip. You think back to evenings when men sat close, hands extended toward low heat, eyes half closed. No one announced that a lesson was coming. Someone simply adjusted a blanket, or shifted a bedroll, or muttered a single comment about wind direction. If you were paying attention, you learned. If not, the night would teach you later. Personal records from winter camps often show how little direct instruction appears on the page. Instead, writers mention things in passing. He showed me how he tucks the edge. He said nothing, just moved the fire. These fragments are easy to miss, but they carried essential information. Knowledge was offered, not imposed. You remember how voices sounded different at night, softer, slower. People conserved breath the same way they conserved heat. Words had weight. If someone spoke, it mattered. This economy of speech filtered out nonsense quickly. There is a small but revealing note in a trapper's journal where he describes learning more in one quiet evening than in weeks of travel. He did not explain what he learned. He simply wrote that he watched and remembered. That sentence carries more wisdom than it first appears to. Scholars continue to discuss how oral transmission shaped frontier survival more than written instruction. Literacy mattered less than attention. The most valuable knowledge rarely appeared in manuals. It lived in habits demonstrated repeatedly until they became invisible. You lie still now, recalling these moments, as if they are happening nearby. Someone coughs softly. Someone clears their throat and then decides not to speak. A blanket edge is tucked with care. These are the lessons. You feel them echo in your own movements tonight. There is a curious detail mentioned in one winter camp letter where a man wrote that advice given too loudly was usually wrong. Loud advice came from confidence, not experience. Quiet advice came from people who had tested their ideas under pressure. You smile faintly at that thought. You adjust your bedroll without waking fully. The movement mirrors something you once saw done casually without explanation. At the time, you did not understand why it mattered. Now your body does. This is how knowledge embeds itself. Understanding arrives later, sometimes much later. Another memory surfaces. A man correcting someone, not with words but by undoing and redoing a setup silently. No embarrassment, no comment, just demonstration. The lesson landed without resistance. You appreciated that approach then. You appreciate it more now. Researchers still debate how much of this quiet instruction was intentional versus incidental. Some argue experienced men deliberately modelled behaviour for newcomers. Others suggest it simply happened naturally as people shared space. Either way, it worked. Survival knowledge spread efficiently. You feel a sense of connection to those quiet exchanges now. Even alone, you're not inventing these habits. You're participating in a long chain of observation and imitation that stretches back through countless nights. The snow outside continues to fall softly. The sound reminds you of how voices dropped when snow fell thick. Snow muffled sound, and people responded instinctively by lowering theirs further. The night became intimate. Lessons travelled more easily in that closeness. You wake briefly and think about how rarely anyone said good night. The concept felt unnecessary. People simply drifted into rest, each maintaining awareness for the group in their own way. This shared responsibility reduced the need for formal endings. There is a fringe story passed along in a few scattered accounts about a man who survived his first winter largely because he listened more than he spoke. Others teased him for his silence. Later, they credited it with his survival. Listening is not passive out here. It is active learning. You settle again, feeling that listening extends inward now. Your body listens to itself, to temperature, to breath, to tension. The same principle applies. If you pay attention early, you avoid crisis later. Historical analysis sometimes overlooks how social these nights were, even when words were few. Shared presence mattered. Knowledge flowed because people were close enough to observe one another without spectacle. You imagine sitting near a low fire again, watching someone older adjust their gear with minimal movement. You notice how nothing is wasted. No extra steps, no flourish. That efficiency speaks louder than instruction. You absorbed it without realizing. Another waking comes. You adjust a fold. The movement feels inherited rather than invented. This realization comforts you. You are not alone in this. You are supported by habits refined long before you needed them. Scholars continue to examine how these informal teaching methods influenced later outdoor cultures. The lineage is difficult to trace, but the behaviors persist. Modern practices still echo these quiet nights. You breathe steadily, feeling gratitude for unnamed teachers who never knew they were teaching. Their lessons live on in your warmth, your dryness, your stillness. The night grows deeper. The snow thickens. Everything feels contained. You drift again, sleep returning smoothly now. In the half-dream state, you hear murmured voices that are not distinct. No words form, just tone, calm, assured. You do not need clarity. The feeling is enough. You wake briefly and realize how much knowledge can be carried without being spoken. It lives in posture, in timing, in restraint, in silence. The mountains remain vast and indifferent. Human voices are small here, yet those quiet exchanges changed outcomes. They meant the difference between a hard night and a fatal one. You rest now held by that accumulated wisdom. You did not read it. You did not memorize it. You lived it. Tonight, it lives through you. Sleep deepens again, gentle and unforced. The lessons of many nights whisper beneath consciousness, guiding adjustments without demanding attention. And in that quiet transmission, past hand to hand, night to night, you move steadily forward, resting safely inside knowledge that never needed to be loud to save lives. Old habits arrive with you, whether you invite them or not. They slip in quietly, disguised as common sense. You recognize them now as you lie awake for a moment, noticing how your body still expects certain comforts that no longer apply. A flat surface, complete undressing, deep, uninterrupted sleep. These ideas belong to another place. You remember how many newcomers try to recreate indoor nights, outdoors, blankets arranged like beds at home, clothing folded neatly aside, heads uncovered because that felt natural. The mountains corrected those habits quickly. Cold has a way of editing assumptions without discussion. Written accounts from early frontier winters often mention how settlers abandoned familiar nighttime routines within weeks. What worked in stone houses failed in log cabins. What worked in cabins failed entirely in open wilderness. People did not philosophize about this shift. They simply stopped doing what did not work. You feel one of those old instincts tug at you now, a desire to stretch out fully, to claim space. You resist gently. Stretching exposes more surface area. Surface area loses heat. You settle back into compact stillness. The urge fades. There is a curious remark in a traveller's letter where he admitted feeling embarrassed the first time he slept fully clothed beside others. He wrote that the embarrassment lasted one night. The cold cured it. Social expectations dissolved faster than frostbite threatened. Scholars continue to explore how quickly cultural habits adapt under environmental pressure. Evidence suggests that sleep practices were among the fastest to change. Food, clothing, and social structure followed more slowly. Night demanded immediate compliance. You think about how privacy changes meaning here. Privacy is not distance, it is warmth, it is dryness, it is the ability to rest without interruption. Those become the new markers of a good night. Everything else becomes negotiable. Another old habit surfaces, the expectation that night is a time of vulnerability. Indoors, darkness often signals danger. Outdoors, vulnerability comes from exposure, not the dark itself. Once that distinction settles in, fear loses much of its power. You feel that shift now. There is an odd, fringe observation noted in a few diaries where men described sleeping better outdoors after months on the frontier than they ever did indoors again. They blamed the stillness, the honesty of conditions, the absence of false comfort. It sounds romantic, but the sentiment appears repeatedly. You wake briefly and check your position. Everything feels correct. That word would have sounded strange to you earlier in the season. Correct sleep, correct posture, correct stillness, correct enough to last until morning. Historical discussion often emphasizes adaptation as a conscious process, but much of it happened below awareness. People stopped expecting what the environment could not provide. Expectations relaxed. With them, frustration faded. You feel that easing now. You remember how indoor nights encouraged total surrender. Deep sleep, disconnection. Out here, surrender looks different. It means trusting systems rather than abandoning awareness. That trust builds slowly, night after night. Another habit breaks quietly. The urge to check time. Without clocks, time loses relevance. Night is not measured in hours, but in conditions. Wind shifts, temperature steadies, snow accumulates. You track these instead. There is a small anecdote tucked into a winter ledger where a man wrote that he stopped caring how long the night was, once he learned how to sleep through it. Length mattered less than manageability. You understand that now? This night feels long, but not unmanageable. Researchers still debate whether abandoning old sleep customs caused long-term discomfort or whether it freed people from unnecessary constraints. The evidence suggests both. Adaptation cost something, but it gave something back. Efficiency replaced ritual. You notice how your breathing has changed over the season. Slower, deeper, more deliberate. This is not just cold response, it is habit reshaped by environment. Your body learned a new baseline. You drift again, then surface briefly aware of a faint desire for softness. A pillow, a mattress. The thought appears without urgency and fades. You do not crave it anymore. You acknowledge it like a memory of childhood. There is a fringe practice mentioned in a few accounts where men carried small tokens from home and placed them near their heads at night, not for superstition, but as reminders of another life. Over time, many stopped doing this. The tokens felt irrelevant. You consider whether you would miss such a thing. The question feels distant. You realize something subtle. By letting go of old habits, you made room for new ones that actually serve you. Clinging to the familiar would have kept you uncomfortable. Release created alignment. The night continues quietly. No urgent sounds, no sudden shifts. Your body rests within the framework you built, not the one you inherited. Another waking arrives. You feel neither cramped nor exposed. That balance would have surprised you earlier. It feels natural now. Your muscles know where to settle. Scholars continue to examine how environmental demands reshape identity through daily routines. Sleep, being so intimate, reveals this transformation clearly. Who you are at night is who you become. You think briefly of those who could not let go, who insisted on old arrangements. Their nights were harder, their mornings colder. Adaptation was not optional. It was survival. You drift again, sleep deepening smoothly. Dreams remain faint, but rest feels substantial. Your body has accepted this way of sleeping as normal. The mountains remain unchanged. You changed instead. That difference matters. You wake once more, then settle immediately. There is nothing to adjust, nothing to fix. Old habits no longer interfere. As sleep thickens, a quiet realization settles with it. Comfort is not something you carry with you. It is something you negotiate with the world around you. Tonight that negotiation succeeded. And in that success, shaped by letting go of what no longer served you, rest comes easily, carrying you onward through the final hours of darkness toward whatever the morning will ask of you next. Numbers never mattered much out here, at least not in the way they do on paper. No one calculated exact temperatures or measured heat loss with instruments, yet somehow you learned to count anyway. Not with figures, but with sensations, with timing, with cause and effect traced through the body. You wake briefly and know without thinking whether you're losing heat or holding it. The answer arrives as a feeling rather than a thought. A cool edge creeping inward means something is wrong. A steady, dull warmth that means the balance is holding. This is mathematics performed through nerve endings rather than ink. Accounts from long winter seasons often note that experienced mountain men could predict how a night would unfold within minutes of lying down. They described it as a sense, not a skill. If warmth stabilized early, the night would likely pass safely. If it fluctuated, trouble followed. This predictive awareness was earned through repetition, not instruction. You feel that awareness now. The cold presses evenly. No sudden drops, no sharp intrusions. That tells you the equation is balanced. Insulation equals heat production minus loss. You do not write this down. You feel it. There is an intriguing remark in a winter ledger where a trader joked that he failed arithmetic in school but mastered it in the snow. He meant that survival demanded constant calculation, just not with numbers. Every movement had a cost, Every adjustment had a return. Waste showed itself immediately. Scholars continue to explore how people internalize physical laws through experience alone. In frontier contexts, understanding conduction, convection, and evaporation was not optional. Even without terminology, people acted in ways that reflected deep intuitive grasp of these principles. You're doing the same now. You wake again noticing a slight coolness near your lower back. You do not analyze, you respond. A small shift redistributes insulation. The coolness fades. The equation balances again. This takes seconds, no thought required. There is a fringe habit mentioned in a few journals where men tested their heat balance by briefly exposing a small patch of skin, then resealing it to feel the difference. It sounds risky, but it trained sensitivity. You do not try this tonight. Your awareness is already sharp enough. The ground beneath you conducts cold steadily. You account for this by minimizing contact points. Pressure compresses insulation. Compressed insulation loses effectiveness. You adjust weight distribution, subtly spreading it. This is physics expressed as comfort. You remember hearing that some mountain men judged heat loss by sound. A faint crackle of frost forming inside bedding signaled trouble. Others listened for changes in breath rhythm. Each person developed their own indicators. What mattered was consistency. Researchers still debate whether this intuitive calculation reduced injury rates over time. Data is scarce. What exists suggests that those who survived multiple winters displayed remarkable consistency in their nightly routines. Consistency reflects understanding. You drift again, then surface briefly. The night feels stable. That stability is the result of dozens of micro-decisions stacking correctly. None of them dramatic, all of them necessary. There is a curious note in a trapper's correspondence where he described feeling warmer after loosening his bedroll slightly rather than tightening it. The added airflow prevented moisture buildup. The result was net warmth. This kind of counterintuitive outcome is common in thermal systems. You smile faintly, recognizing the pattern. You adjust nothing now. The system is holding. Adjusting without need introduces variables. Variables complicate equations. Simplicity keeps them solvable. Your breathing remains deep and slow. Each breath brings in cold air and sends out warmth. The exchange feels balanced, not taxing, sustainable. This is another calculation, one you perform unconsciously. You think briefly about how modern life outsources these calculations. Thermostats, insulation codes, heating systems. Out here, the body does the accounting directly. The feedback loop is immediate and unforgiving. A mainstream observation from frontier studies notes that experienced winter travelers wasted remarkably little energy. Their movements were economical, their routines efficient. This efficiency was not frugality. It was math applied through habit. You wake again and test your fingers. Warm, flexible. This tells you circulation is not being sacrificed to core heat. The system has margin. That margin allows deeper rest. There is a lesser-known anecdote where a man described sleeping with his hands on his stomach to feel heat distribution. If his hands cooled too much, he knew the balance was off. You do something similar now without planning to. Awareness flows where attention has been trained. Scholars still argue whether this kind of embodied calculation can be taught deliberately or must be learned through exposure. Manuals can describe principles, but they cannot replicate feedback. The body learns fastest when consequences are immediate. You settle again deeper now. Calculations continue in the background without waking you. Your nervous system hums quietly, adjusting circulation, respiration, muscle tension. All of this happens without conscious command. Another waking arrives. The night feels slightly warmer than before. Perhaps snow thickened further. Perhaps the wind shifted. You register the change and let it go. Favourable variables require no action. There is a fringe belief mentioned in a few scattered letters that the coldest hour always arrived just before dawn. While not universally true, the belief shaped behavior. People conserved energy in anticipation. You do the same now, even without checking time. You drift again, sleep deepening. Dreams remain faint, but rest feels real. Your body is not fighting the night, it is balancing within it. The equation holds. Heat generated equals heat retained. Moisture controlled, wind deflected, ground insulated, awareness present. This is the solution. You wake once more and realize that the night no longer feels threatening. It feels predictable. Predictability is comfort in harsh environments. As sleep thickens toward the later hours, you carry this understanding with you. Survival here is not about strength or endurance alone. It is about continuous calculation, performed quietly, patiently, through the body. Tonight the numbers add up, and because they do, you rest more deeply, carried forward by a system that knows exactly how much warmth to keep, how much to release, and how to last until morning without wasting a single degree more than necessary. Fear never disappears out here. It changes shape instead. Early on it feels sharp and noisy, full of imagined threats. Later, it becomes quieter, more useful. You learn to keep it close without letting it drive. Fear, when managed, sharpens attention rather than stealing sleep. You notice it now as a low hum beneath awareness. Not panic, not dread, just caution. It reminds you to listen, to check, to respect the night without arguing with it. This version of fear does not wake you fully. It keeps you aligned. Personal winter accounts often reveal this shift indirectly. Early journal entries brim with tension, with exaggerated descriptions of danger. Later entries grow calmer, even during worse conditions. The fear did not vanish. It matured. It became selective. You wake briefly and sense a sound that does not belong. Your pulse lifts slightly, then steadies. You wait. The sound does not repeat. The moment passes. Fear did its job. It alerted you without exhausting you. You settle again. There is a telling passage in a trapping memoir where a man admitted that the nights he feared most were the ones that taught him how to sleep. Fear forced him to prepare properly. Once preparation improved, fear softened. This cycle appears often in frontier writing. Fear refined skill. Skill reduced fear. Scholars continue to debate whether constant, low-level vigilance caused long-term stress among mountain men, or whether it became a stable baseline. Evidence suggests adaptation occurred. The nervous system recalibrated. What once felt threatening became informational. You feel that recalibration now. A distant sound registers, is evaluated and released. No adrenaline surge follows. Your breathing remains even. This balance allows sleep to continue. There is a fringe habit described in a few scattered journals where men deliberately listed potential dangers before sleep, then mentally crossed them off once precautions were in place. It sounds ritualistic, but it worked. Naming fear removed its ambiguity. You do something similar now without words. You feel that nothing immediate has been overlooked. Your body relaxes further once that internal checklist completes itself. Muscles loosen, jaw softens. Fear no longer needs to shout to be heard. It whispers instead. You drift again, sleep thickening. Dreams remain muted. When images appear, they lack urgency. No chasing, no falling, just movement through space. Fear stays awake enough to watch without intruding. Historical analysis sometimes frames courage as fearlessness, but frontier nights tell a different story. Courage looked like restraint. It meant not running at every noise, not ignoring genuine signals. Fear was a tool, not an enemy. You wake again, briefly feeling the cold steady against your skin. It does not alarm you. Cold without change is not threat. Change is threat. You listen for change. None arrives. There is a curious detail in a winter ledger where a man wrote that he trusted fear more when he was tired. Fatigue stripped away imagination and left only real signals. Whether this was true or simply comforting is unclear. You notice that tiredness has quieted your thoughts tonight. Fear feels cleaner, more focused. Researchers still discuss how fear shaped sleep architecture in extreme environments. Some suggest lighter sleep, improved reaction time. Others argue it increased exhaustion. As with many things out here, the answer seems to be balance. Too much fear wakes you constantly. Too little lets danger slip through. You adjust nothing. The system holds. Fear remains in the background, satisfied. Another waking arrives. You listen. Wind, snow, your own breath, all familiar. You release awareness again. There is a faint satisfaction in knowing fear did not have to escalate tonight. It did its job, early encouraging preparation, then stepped aside. This cooperation feels earned. You drift deeper now, the later hours of night approaching. Fear dims further like a watchfire, banked but not extinguished. It will flare if needed. Until then, it rests. You sense that your body trusts this arrangement. Heart rate slows, muscles remain warm and loose. The mind no longer rehearses scenarios. Preparation already handled that. A brief dream flickers, but fear does not enter it. The dream dissolves quickly. You remain in restful darkness. The mountains remain vast and indifferent. Fear remains present but contained. Between them you occupy a narrow safe space carved by experience. As sleep deepens toward the final stretch before dawn, you realize something quietly important. Fear kept you alive long enough to learn how not to need it constantly. That is its gift. You rest now, not because fear is gone, but because it has been integrated. It no longer disrupts, it supports. And in that balanced relationship shaped by countless cold nights, before you rest becomes possible even in the wildest places. Age changes how the cold speaks to you. It does not announce itself suddenly. It arrives as a gradual shift in how your body answers back. Nights that once felt manageable begin to demand more attention. You notice this not with frustration, but with curiosity. The wilderness has always required adaptation. Age simply adds another variable. You wake briefly and stretch your fingers, testing circulation. They respond a little slower than they once did. Not badly, just differently. You account for this without judgment. Denial wastes energy. Adjustment preserves it. Frontier journals occasionally hint at this shift in quiet ways. Older trappers wrote more about preparation and less about endurance. They chose camps more carefully. They moved less at night. They prioritized dryness and insulation over distance traveled. The change is subtle, but it appears consistently. You feel it in your joints first. Cold settles there with more persistence. You counter it by staying still longer, by allowing warmth to build gradually, rather than forcing movement. Forced movement creates sweat. Sweat creates problems. Patience works better now. There is a curious remark in a winter letter where an older mountain man advised a younger companion to stop proving himself to the cold. He wrote that the cold did not care about pride. It only respected systems. You understand that advice fully now. Researchers still discuss whether aging bodies adapted better or worse to prolonged cold exposure. Some evidence suggests experience compensated for physical decline. Knowledge replaced strength. Older men often survived longer winters, not by pushing harder, but by avoiding mistakes. You adjust your bedroll slightly, adding a layer where pressure points develop more easily now. Hips, shoulders, these spots lose heat faster with age. You address them early, rather than waking later in discomfort. Anticipation becomes more important. You wake again briefly noticing your breathing feels shallower than earlier in life. You respond by slowing it deliberately, deepening each inhale and exhale. This keeps oxygenation steady and prevents tension. Control replaces instinct as the body changes. There is a fringe belief mentioned in a few accounts that older men slept lighter by necessity, waking more often to check circulation and warmth. Whether this was age or experience is unclear. You feel the truth somewhere in between. Lighter sleep now feels protective rather than disruptive. You think about how younger men often chased warmth aggressively. More fire, more movement, more layers. Older men favored balance Enough warmth, enough stillness, enough rest. The difference lies in knowing when to stop. Historical analysis sometimes romanticizes youth on the frontier, but winter survival often belonged to those who lasted. Longevity came from restraint. You feel that wisdom settling into your bones, now as real as the cold. You wake again, noticing a faint stiffness in your knees. You do not straighten them fully. That would expose too much. Instead, you make small controlled movements, restoring circulation without breaking insulation. The stiffness fades. This maintenance happens without thought now. Scholars continue to debate how aging altered risk tolerance among mountain men. Some suggest older men took fewer chances. Others argue they took smarter ones. The distinction matters. Avoidance is not fear, it is strategy. You listen again. The night remains steady. Snow has done its work. Wind behaves. Your body feels balanced again. Adjustments complete. There is a quiet satisfaction in recognizing limits and working within them. Limits clarify priorities. You no longer waste energy on unnecessary movement. You invest it where it counts. You drift deeper now, sleep returning smoothly. Dreams remain faint, but rest feels solid. Your body may not rebound as quickly as it once did, but it recovers efficiently. Another waking arrives. You check your feet. Still warm. This matters more with age. Circulation changes subtly over years. You stay attentive without becoming anxious. Anxiety accelerates fatigue. Calm preserves strength. You remember reading that older trappers often became teachers rather than leaders of long journeys. Their nights were lessons in efficiency. Watching them taught more than listening. You feel yourself embodying that role now, even alone. The night continues, but it no longer feels like something to conquer. It feels like something to move through carefully. Age sharpens that understanding. You settle again deeper now. Your muscles relax fully. The bedroll supports you. Snow insulates. The cold remains constant, but you're prepared for it. As sleep thickens, you feel gratitude for experience. Youth brought strength. Experience brings precision. Tonight, precision matters more. You drift toward the later hours of darkness with fewer interruptions now. The body has adjusted. The system holds. Age does not weaken survival. It refines it. And in that refinement, shaped by countless cold nights and quiet corrections, you rest more deeply than you might expect, carried forward, not by force, but by understanding. Sleep becomes an act of trust. Not blind trust, but practiced trust earned through repetition. You cannot stay awake forever. Eventually, you must hand responsibility to the systems you built and the people around you. Even alone, that handoff still happens. You trust the land you chose. You trust the habits you formed. You trust that if something changes, you will wake. You feel this trust settle in now, not as a thought, but as a loosening. Your shoulders sink slightly. Your jaw relaxes. Breathing deepens without instruction. This is the moment when vigilance steps back just enough to let rest take over. Accounts from long winter camps often note that the best sleepers were not the bravest or the strongest, but the ones who trusted their companions. One man stayed alert while another slept. Then they switched. This unspoken agreement allowed deeper rest than solitary vigilance ever could. Trust was shared, and so was survival. Even tonight, without anyone beside you, that structure still exists in memory. You imagine another person nearby, not watching you, but sharing responsibility for the night itself. The idea alone steadies the nervous system. Humans are wired to rest better when not carrying everything alone. There is a quiet observation in one expedition journal where a leader wrote that he slept deepest on nights when he knew someone else would wake him if needed. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. The meaning is clear. Trust creates depth. Scholars continue to examine whether shared trust altered sleep cycles in extreme environments. Some argue it allowed longer periods of deeper rest. Others suggest it simply reduced anxiety. Either way, the outcome favoured survival. You wake briefly and test that trust. Nothing has changed. No new sounds, no sudden cold. The system holds. You sink again without resistance. There is a fringe practice mentioned in a few scattered letters where men would deliberately announce before sleep that they were resting, as if telling the night itself. The ritual signaled a shift of responsibility. Whether symbolic or practical, it worked. You do not speak, but you feel the same transition internally. Your breathing slows further. Each inhale feels fuller. Each exhale releases tension. This depth of breath only comes when the body believes it is safe enough to rest. Safety here does not mean absence of danger. It means confidence in response. You remember earlier nights when sleep felt thin and fragile. Every sound pulled you back. Every sensation demanded attention. Tonight feels different. Not careless, grounded. You earned this. Historical analysis often focuses on the dangers of the frontier, but trust receives less attention. Trust in land, in weather knowledge, in routines in each other. Without it, no one slept well. Without sleep, no one survived long. You drift again deeper now. Dreams approach more slowly, if at all. Rest feels heavier, more restorative. Muscles stop twitching. Circulation evens out. This is the kind of sleep that repairs rather than merely pauses. Another brief waking arrives. You listen. Wind, snow, your own breath, all familiar. You do not analyze further. You let go. There is a subtle shift in how time feels. Moments stretch. You could not say how long you have been asleep. That is a sign of trust. Timekeeping dissolves when the body no longer anticipates interruption. Researchers still debate whether this trust-based sleep carried risks. What if something went wrong while everyone rested? Evidence suggests the benefits outweighed the risks. Exhaustion killed faster than surprise. Balanced rest saved lives. You notice how your body feels heavier now, anchored. The bedroll presses gently against you. Snow supports from outside. The earth holds steady beneath. You are nested within layers of reliability. Another memory surfaces briefly. A man saying, "Go on, get some rest, I've got this." You remember how those words felt. You feel that sensation now, even if no one spoke it tonight. You wake again, just enough to register warmth and stillness. Nothing calls you back fully. You drift again immediately. The night continues, but it no longer presses against you. You are inside it rather than under it. That distinction matters. As sleep deepens further, trust becomes complete. Not reckless, complete enough. Your body lets go of the last tight places. Muscles soften, breath flows. The mountains remain indifferent. The cold remains present. But you're no longer negotiating every moment. The agreement has been reached. You rest now in the quiet understanding that if something demands your attention, you will answer. Until then, you are allowed to sleep. And in that allowance shaped by countless nights, where trust was tested and refined, rest settles in fully carrying you through the final stretch of darkness, toward the faint, inevitable return of light. Morning becomes an idea long before it becomes light. You sense it without seeing anything change. The cold shifts character. Not warmer exactly, but less aggressive. The air feels slightly lighter, as if the night has spent most of its strength already. You wake briefly and realize you have been sleeping longer between checks. That tells you more than a clock ever could. The most dangerous hours are passing. The night has not defeated you. You have moved through it correctly. Frontier journals often mention this subtle pre-dawn phase with surprising affection. Writers described it as the night loosening its grip. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden relief. Just a gradual easing felt more in the body than the environment. You listen. The wind sounds different now. Softer. Less committed. Snow settles instead of falling. These changes signal that the world is preparing to turn again. You do not rush to greet it. Rushing wastes warmth. There is a small detail recorded in one winter diary where a man wrote that he never stood up immediately upon waking near dawn. He waited, letting his body fully register the transition. Standing too quickly shocked cold muscles and invited mistakes. You follow that wisdom now, without thinking. Scholars continue to examine whether the human body anticipates dawn through circadian rhythm or whether environmental cues dominate in wilderness settings. The truth appears blended. Light matters, but so do sound temperature and fatigue. You feel all of them shifting together. You remain still, breathing deeply, letting warmth redistribute before movement. This pause feels deliberate, respectful. The night deserves that. It tested you. You passed. Another waking arrives, but it feels different. Less alert, more rested. Your muscles respond readily when you flex fingers and toes. No stiffness, no numbness. This is the reward for all those small decisions made hours earlier. There is a curious anecdote from a trapping camp where men describe dawn as the most dangerous time, not because of predators, but because of carelessness. Relief made people sloppy. Boots went on wrong. Fire was mishandled. Energy spiked too quickly. Experienced men warned against celebrating too early. You remember that caution now. You do not move yet. You do not sit up. You simply exist, letting the transition complete itself. Researchers still debate how much nighttime success influenced daytime performance. Evidence suggests a direct link. Men who slept well made better decisions the next day. Survival compounded. One good night led to another. You listen again. Somewhere far off, a faint sound carries that was not there before. Perhaps a bird testing the air. Perhaps ice shifting. It does not matter which. It means the world is waking. You take a slow breath and notice how it feels different. Less brittle, more forgiving. Your chest expands easily. That tells you your body's ready. There is a fringe belief mentioned in a few letters that if you woke warm just before dawn, the day would go well. While superstition played a role, the underlying logic held. Warmth meant systems worked. Systems working meant better odds. You allow yourself a small smile, barely perceptible. Not triumph, acknowledgement. You did what needed doing. Another brief check follows. Bedroll intact. No dampness. Snow settled where it helped. Tools untouched. Boots reachable. Everything remains where you left it. This consistency is the true sign of success. Historical analysis sometimes frames survival as dramatic moments strung together. In reality, it was often this quiet. Nights passed without incident because they were managed properly. Those nights rarely made good stories, but they made survival possible. You shift slightly, now testing the idea of movement. Muscles respond willingly. You could sit up if needed. You choose not to yet. Waiting costs nothing now and preserves warmth. The sky above remains dark, but it no longer feels endless. You sense the coming change without impatience. Dawn will arrive when it arrives. You think briefly about all the lessons layered into this night. Ground choice, wind management, snow insulation, clothing discipline, bedroll care, listening, trust. None of them shouted. All of them worked together. Scholars still debate which single factor mattered most in winter survival. The consensus leans toward integration. No one trick saved lives. Systems did. You lived inside a system tonight. You rest a little longer, letting sleep thin naturally, rather than breaking it. This gentler waking preserves energy and clarity. You are not dragging yourself out of the night. You are emerging from it. Another faint sound reaches you, closer now. The day side of the world stirring. You take it in without urgency. The cold remains, but it no longer feels predatory. It feels residual, manageable. You could work in this. You could travel. You could build a fire if needed. For now, you remain still savouring the narrow moment where night and day overlap. This is the reward phase, quiet and easily missed. As awareness settles fully, you recognise something important. You did not just survive the night, you learned from it. The knowledge is now inside your body, ready for the next one. And as the idea of morning strengthens, you lie there a moment longer, warm enough, rested, enough prepared to rise. When the light finally arrives, carrying you forward into whatever the wilderness asks next. You realise somewhere between the last stretch of darkness and the first hint of light that you're no longer actively thinking about how to survive the night. That work is finished. The knowledge has slipped beneath conscious thoughts, settling into reflex and posture, breath and timing. What once required attention now happens on its own. You wake and know immediately that nothing is wrong. Not because you checked, but because your body tells you so. Warmth feels even. Dryness holds. Muscles respond without protest. This certainty arrives without celebration. It feels ordinary. That ordinariness is the clearest sign of mastery. Accounts from seasoned mountain men often grow quieter in their later years. Early journals detail every hardship. Later ones simply note that the night passed. This shift was not boredom. It was competence. When survival becomes routine, it stops demanding narration. You lie still and recognize how little effort it takes now to remain comfortable. You do not calculate. You do not adjust. You simply exist within a system that has proven itself. Snow remains where it should. Wind behaves, the bedroll supports, clothing insulates, fear stays quiet, trust holds. There is a small observation in one long-running trapper's journal where he wrote that the mountains stopped feeling hostile once he stopped arguing with them. He did not mean they became gentle, he meant they became predictable. Predictability, not comfort, is what allowed sleep. Scholars continue to discuss when knowledge becomes instinct. Some argue it requires repetition. Others say it requires consequence. Out here, it required both. Nights like this one rewired responses faster than any instruction could. You stretch slightly, now testing readiness. The movement feels smooth, no stiffness lingers. This tells you the night was not just endured, but used well. Rest repaired rather than merely paused your body. There is a fringe belief, mentioned in a few scattered writings, that the first winter rewires a person permanently. Even after returning to softer places, something remains. Sleep changes. Awareness deepens. Comfort is redefined. You suspect there is truth in that. This night will stay with you. You sit up slowly, not rushing, allowing blood to redistribute. The air feels different against your face now. Less biting, more neutral. The world has shifted just enough to signal permission to move. Historical summaries of frontier life often highlight skill acquisition during travel or trade. But nights were the real classrooms. 8 hours of exposure taught more than days of walking. You feel the accumulation of those lessons, now layered and secure. You gather yourself without urgency. Everything is where it should be. Tools untouched, boots ready. The simple order around you reflects the order inside you. Nothing scrambled, nothing forgotten. You take one final moment to listen, not for danger, but for understanding. Wind threads through trees. Snow settles. Somewhere the day prepares itself. These sounds no longer demand response. They simply exist. Researchers still debate whether this level of adaptation dulled sensitivity or sharpened it. Evidence suggests sharpening. The body learns what matters and discards noise. Tonight proved that. You stand finally feeling the ground beneath your feet. It feels solid, trustworthy. You have learned how to meet it correctly. The knowledge you carry now does not feel heavy. It does not feel earned through suffering. It feels natural, as if it always belonged to you and merely waited for the right conditions to surface. And before you move fully into the day, there is a final pause, a quiet recognition of what just happened. You slept safely in a freezing wilderness, not because of luck, not because of toughness, but because you listened, adapted, and allowed experience to become instinct. The night did not defeat you, it trained you. You draw a slow breath, feeling warmth hold steady inside your chest, and step forward into the thinning darkness, carrying with you a kind of knowledge that does not announce itself, does not boast, and does not fade easily. It simply remains ready for the next night, and the next long after. The memory of this one has softened into something calm and steady. Now the pace begins to slow even further. The mountains feel less sharp in your awareness, as if they are stepping back to give you space. Your breathing lengthens naturally, each inhale unhurried, each exhale loose and unforced. There is no instruction anymore, no lesson to hold on to. Everything you needed to know has already settled where it belongs. You imagine the snow continuing to insulate long after you move on, the quiet habits continuing without you, nights passing for others the same way they passed for you, calm, patient, manageable. There is nothing left to prepare, nothing left to prove. Your body knows how to rest, your mind knows when to let go. So you allow the final images to soften. The sound of wind fades into something distant and reassuring. The cold becomes a background presence rather than a threat. Even the idea of survival drifts out of focus, replaced by a gentle sense of belonging within the rhythm of the world. If you are listening to this as sleep pulls you under, let it. Let the night feel wide but not dangerous. Let the darkness feel deep but not heavy. You are warm enough, you are safe enough, you are allowed to rest. And if you are still awake, that is fine too. Stay here a little longer, breathing slowly, letting the calm settle fully before moving on. Either way, the story has done its work. The night has loosened its grip. Sweet dreams.